2, 1, hello, welcome to the Davidthedogtrainer podcast, episode 39. It's actually 39 this time.
Yes.
Today we're joined by special guests, Amanda and Kate of Process Canine of Shaker Heights.
Thank you for having us.
Guys.
Here they are.
Hello.
Okay, so I am extremely excited for this one. I've told you numerous times before. So, like, one, it's officially nice to, like, kind of meet you because we've tried to do that a couple of times. It didn't work. And I'm very excited for this conversation because as somebody who is very, like, egotistical about, like, my training and business and all those types of things, it's, like, sometimes very hard to, like, look at, like, other things going on in the area and be like, oh, man, like, that's really freaking good. Yeah. And you guys have consistently been the only business, I think, locally that I've really just consistently talked about as being one of the best, like, boarding daycare training facilities in Cleveland. So you guys do an awesome job.
That's super,
and
that's
I'm very
flattering.
excited to talk about it.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's awesome.
So we'll start off very straightforward, and I want to kind of just hear a little bit about you guys, a little bit about your background with things, and then we'll kind of get into talking about whatever. Who wants to start?
Amanda, you go.
Sure.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I would say like 12 years now, I just randomly started working at a daycare downtown. Pretty quickly, like I didn't have any dog experience. I loved it. It was really fun. Pretty quickly started running that place to the point where basically like a general manager for a couple of years. Kind of just outgrew it and decided to leave and do some dog sitting out of my house, which I'd already been doing for some of those clients anyway. So I lived in Lakewood, did some dog sitting out of the house. At that time, I was actually looking to start my own daycare. Looking back now, like didn't really know all that was going to entail. So I'm glad that nothing fell through there.
Yeah.
So lived in Lakewood doing dog sitting, like overnight boarding for a handful of clients, and then actually started a small daycare for those clients too. So like I got a van, I'd go out in the morning, I pick the dogs up, we do like walks, and a lot of these dogs were off leashable, that kind of thing. It was awesome. A lot of my clients were on the east side. So like I love the west side, but we had to move back. So moved to Cleveland Heights, did the same thing there. It was all word of mouth. Like Process Canine wasn't a name. It was just like, are you that lady who does the dogs? Like that lady who has all the dogs at her house. So, you kind of get burnt out, like having it at your house. Like it's awesome. And sometimes I miss just like this low pressure. I wake up, I pick up some dogs, we walk. Like it really is a walk in the park. But you can't, it's hard to scale. You're always at work. Like you always have dogs in the house. So that's when I got more serious about training. And I was like, okay, like I think I'm going to just do training and drop the daycare and the boarding.
You're doing daycare at your house? You said?
Small scale. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I would pick up, like I would just have keys to some people's house. So, different dogs on different days. It was all the same dogs that were boarding. So it was these very regular clients. I'd go pick up the dog. They'd come to my house. They'd have dog play. It was more like walks. The off leash was a big thing, swimming.
Yeah.
So I decided to go out to the Michael L. School. So I didn't do the immersion program. I just sequenced his 4-week classes. It was amazing. It was the best time ever.
How long were you out there for?
4 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe like 4.5. Michael L. School is incredible. You don't necessarily leave there like ready to be a pet dog trainer.
Yeah.
Which I found out, like I was like, okay, but what do I do if a dog is like being reactive?
Yeah.
What do I do? So I started then definitely formed how I train dogs. Like it's still like a strong foundation. So I started like a little bit of pet dog training. I certainly, looking back, like didn't know what I was doing, and kind of had all three of these things going on some level. And then in Shaker Heights, the city sponsored this grant competition. Shaker Heights has like 3 commercial districts, and they're small, and they're like definitely not a place you typically look to put a dog daycare.
Yeah.
But there's one, we're in the Cedar Lee area, and it's like, they're kind of hungry for businesses there. It's sort of not the most substantial at the time.
It's a weird area.
It is.
Yeah.
It's weird. Like a lot of people in Shaker didn't know it was Shaker. They thought they were in Cleveland.
Yeah.
So they sponsored this grant competition. It was basically like a pitch competition for a business. And the winner got $20,000 if they got in a spot on Cedar Lee, so towards a lease. So just on a whim, I signed up, ended up winning it. And then that put me in touch with some really important people at Shaker that were helpful. So what ended up happening is this Shaker Heights Development Corporation, which isn't the city, it's like a private thing. bought this it used to be a nursery, a plant nursery. They bought this building and with the intent of leasing it to me. So that whole thing took about a year and a half. Like we had to go through tons of zoning and variances and all that stuff. So yeah, open there. And then Kate and my other manager, Liza, were my first 2 hires. So, and then we were just like, Kate would come for an interview and the place looked like a dump. There was like things all over the ground. Like one of their first days was picking up trash in the yard. And, she was like, yeah, I'd love to work here.
The whole thing.
Yeah. So the initial plan for the business, I mean, it's still what it is. It's daycare, boarding, and training. It's definitely the bulk of the business is the daycare and the boarding is kind of like our sweet spot. Since Kate, and then we ended up leasing a space next door to dedicate as the training. So then it kind of separated. Kate became full-time trainer. And so now like that ball's in play as well. But yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I've done some other training things. I did a week shadow program with your friend Tyler.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Nice.
It was awesome. I was down there
the
and he was like, yeah, I'm friends with this guy by you named David. And he was talking about like how David comes down and stuff. And I was like, this guy over here, I'm paying like, a couple thousand to be down here for this.
In fairness, the first 2 times I went out there, I paid him for it. And then after that, he's just like, you're
That's
good.
what he said. He's like, I was like, oh gosh, darn. But that was one of my, like I've done other seminars that I've been to and self-education, but that was my biggest like transformation as like that really solidified even just watching how he runs his business like oh, okay, like this is how this goes.
He's so smart. And the thing, so I had a similar like involvement in getting into training where it was like I went through all the Michael Ellis stuff initially, right? Like my first experience to dog training was Rob handing me The Power of Training Dogs with Food and just being like, you have to watch this. And I remember sitting there with my notebook and the freaking movie is like 4 or 5 hours long.
It's really long.
You know? And I would sit there with my notebook just watching it over and over and over again. Just like writing everything down. And I learned so much from it. But yeah, it's very hard to take that knowledge and be like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to be a successful pet dog trainer now. Because it's like taking a college course on dog training that doesn't give you any like real world application, right? It gives you all of the knowledge you need and all of the foundational concepts and stuff like that. It helps you understand then all of the information you're going to learn about actually doing pet dog training, you know? And it's interesting because I couldn't be more lucky that was my first experience with it. And I'm sure you as well, because it's funny because you could look at everything everybody else is doing now and having that baseline knowledge at such a high level, you could find all the holes in everything, you know? And it's funny. I'm sure you look at trainers, you're like, not that there's anything bad about them, but like that's like scientifically incorrect what you're doing right now.
Like
you know?
your timing's off. And it's definitely like made me feel like a huge diva.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's not 100%. And I think it allows you to be really like, and I still, and I encourage Kate, we've done a lot of this too. Like I spend a lot of time like reading and looking at other trainers. Like when I first was interested in training, I read a lot of like Karen Pryor, Patricia McConnell, which is still very valuable. Like I really like, but Michael Ellis is like the one trainer, like when he says something, I'm like, yes. Tyler Muto, I feel the same way about. Like, I'm like, like that's like, and now we're here. We're going to hit 4 years at that facility in November.
That's so awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
I remember when you guys were opening that space, or when it was like talk that you guys were getting ready to open that space, and literally first thing going on in my head is I was just like, fuck, like, because I think we knew at the time, like so I was still with Heights at the time. I think we knew at the time, like the way we were currently running our business, there was absolutely no way we can compete with the way that you guys were about to do it. Like, just like the space itself, like that outdoor area is
so
just
lucky.
out of this world.
Awesome.
You guys had so much more room that it was just like, and we knew you obviously and like your mindset on things and stuff, and it wasn't going to be just your typical like daycare and boarding kennel, you know? So that was really cool. I remember it was like the talk of town in the Shaker Heights area.
Yes.
You know?
Shaker's very super supportive of their businesses.
Yeah.
And they're very much like, if in a good way, like if they're doing this, we're going to do this. And then, it's, and this is a referral business. You guys know that. Like it's going to, take it so far. But yeah, that was just a huge break. Got really lucky with the whole thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Kate?
So how'd you get involved in the dog stuff?
I don't know how far to take it, I guess. I like how far back?
As you want.
Okay. At least when you're walking. Like, let's start when you're
Okay. Well, I guess I've always been really, really interested in having a career in the animal industry. And when I was younger, I mean, up until I became one, I didn't even see dog training as like being an attainable goal. I don't know why. I just like, you don't meet people that often, unless you're in this field, you don't meet dog trainers that often.
No.
It just seems very much like a lifestyle. Like they figured it out, and good luck. Like, you know, if you want to try to get there too. But so when I was in college, I kind of was considering like my options, and I kind of hit the point where I was like, okay, if I don't want to go into veterinary medicine, then like I probably won't be doing any type of dog related career. I fostered like some service dogs in training. I volunteered at a shelter. I had just like little bits here and there. And I was like, okay, I'll find a job. I'll volunteer with dogs, whatever. So I got a degree in psychology, and I ended up started working for Amanda part-time, and I was working at a school part-time, and I was doing daycare, and I loved it. It was like so fun. I was like, I didn't even know this existed. Like,
Yeah, right.
every little thing was extremely exciting. Amanda can attest to that. I was like, what? Like, you can do that with that dog? And it was so cool. So, and I remember eventually talking to her, and we were kind of talking about, I'd been there for at least a year or so at the time, and I said something about, well, you know, like eventually I'm going to have to like leave and get a full-time job. Cause like in my mind, I was like, yeah, like this is my part-time job. I have another part-time job, and like, I'm going to find something where I'm there all day.
Yeah.
And Amanda was like, well, and I think I said something about dogs.
Yeah.
She was like,
okay, no.
She was like surprised by that.
Don't leave.
Yeah, she was surprised by that. And I was like, yeah, well, like I want to grow. Like I want to find a position where like I can grow in. And I mentioned training, and Amanda was like, well, like, would you be my dog trainer? And I was like, wait, are you kidding me right now? I was like, you're going to teach me how to be a dog. Like I can be a dog trainer? And she's like, yeah, like sure. Like she was like, I'd love to take on another trainer. And I was like, oh my God. And it was like amazing. So we started training dogs. I was doing part-time still for a little bit. We were training dogs like in one of like the back rooms of the facility for, I don't know, 8 months to a year or so. And then we opened up the training space. I left my other job, and I started working for her full time. And that's what we've been doing. And it's been awesome. Yeah.
That's awesome. Had you had a lot of prior like actual training experience, or did you guys just you kind of learned through her? Or?
Yeah, I had none. I had my own dog, and that was it.
Yeah.
I mean, when I helped raise the service dogs, it was all about socialization, and like looking back on it, there's certain things that most things I would have done differently, but it was mostly just getting these dogs out in the world.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have any experience.
Yeah. Which is obviously extremely important. What organization were you doing it for? Do you know?
Four Paws for Ability. It's in Xenia, Ohio.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one. But it is interesting. So I have a buddy that was from Columbus that used to work for Pilot Dogs down there.
Oh,
was,
yeah.
like, seeing
Cool.
eyes
They're
and
the big
stuff.
one, yeah.
Yeah, and hearing him talk about some of the stories about like how they used to like train and get these dogs exposed and stuff like that. It's a really interesting process. You know,
it's
like,
really cool.
It gets easy as a dog trainer to like get into that mindset of like, oh, I'm just a dog trainer. So like all of these things are kind of in my wheelhouse, where everybody has their own little niche with it. You know?
There's so many. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. The concepts are all the same and stuff, but like, you know, the actual application of it, like we were talking about, from like Michael Ellis to Tyler to Pilot Dogs to this to that, right? It's completely different.
Yeah, so many specialized applications of certain uses of certain skills that like we wouldn't do for pet dogs. We wouldn't know about.
Sure.
So it's really cool.
Yeah.
I do want to add too. I have a dog, and I had a dog. He lived with me throughout just my senior year of college, but he was in my world, my eyes, just an easy dog.
Sure.
There were definitely like behavioral things I wanted to change. Like Amanda helped me off leash train him, and that was like changed my whole everything. It changed everything and how I lived with that dog. But in terms of experience, I never would even think to seek out a trainer, because I was like, oh, he's easy. Like there aren't issues until you start to learn like, oh yeah, there are small issues. There's a lot of little things we can work on. But I had wouldn't have even hired a trainer. Yeah. So I'm lucky I fell into it.
It's interesting the idea you brought up of like, you know, training, you know, you thought of it more as like this lifestyle and stuff like that. I think, you know, I don't think people really realize what training is until they're immersed into it, you know, until you start to see, like I remember going and working for the first guy that I worked for and seeing him with his Malinois like do these different commands and stuff like that. I was like, what? Yeah. Like, how do you have that level of control over things?
Yeah.
Like, it's so impressive, because my only experience with training up to that point was like go to your friend's house and it's like they got a dog. It's like, yeah, I trained my dog myself. Lay down, lay down, lay down. And then like finally the dog will kind of like lay down.
Sit.
Yeah. Like, wow, they're really well trained.
You're right.
You know?
We love the sit.
So really interesting. I think that's cool. And when you get immersed in it, like I was the same way where it's like, God, like I just want, like it's so exciting. You know, it's like this is such a cool industry to be a part of, you know?
Like, I can do this is a possibility. Like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it. Yeah, it was very cool.
100%. So did you start off as offering all three of those services, or did you start off just doing the boarding and daycare, or how did that kind of work and how did that grow?
Yeah. So our first like training program that got bigger than I thought it was gonna and we still offer it, is Rookie Camp, which is like our puppy day train. So instead of just like plucking 10-week-old dogs into daycare, they sort of get like a specialized day where they get social and training. And that's actually where I first started using you too. And Kate's always been like right from day one, like exactly the type of trainer you want to walk in your door.
Sure.
Like, I don't know anything. I'm going to ask a million questions. I'm going to challenge you on everything in a very smart way.
Like,
100%, show me how this works. And so Rookie Camp was the first thing. And then I wanted to offer board and trains. At that time, I did it like I did in my house. Like I would like, everything was like ridiculously cheap. I would like price it by like, hey, I think I'll do this in 2 weeks. Here's our goals. It was very like, and that was just like I'd meet someone or like it would be like one of our clients that was coming. Hey, I did like one dog at a time and it was just me. It certainly wasn't like as we've kind of like really refined the process and now it's basically more structured and things like that, especially with Kate's help. Same with lessons. Like it was crazy. The daycare guy, I thought we were going to be able to split that facility in half and like I'd have a training room. We very quickly just used the whole thing. So I would do training on a weekend. I'd go in, we'd put the boarding dogs up. I'd like clean the whole front room up and I'd have clients in. So it was just like when I could, basically kind of doing that stuff. And then, you know, like as I trained staff, I could leave more and spend more time at training. But the training center helped now. Like obviously we can run private lessons all day if we want. So it was just me. Kate was helping with all the day stuff. Like if we would do day trains too. Like if I had clients, I'm like, hey, you know, come in for this thing. And then, but now, I mean, for the past year, you've been doing private lessons. Which I think is the hardest thing as a dog trainer. I think private lessons is like
most rewarding.
Yeah, I think lessons are interesting because it requires the highest degree of people skills, you know, which is the hardest part about it. Like, you know, like we're looking to possibly hire a new one-on-one trainer here soon. And the biggest thing we're looking for is people that have the experience in already conducting. You don't even have to have that much knowledge of dog training, but if you have the experience of kind of controlling the room for an hour, that's the hardest part. Because when I first started, it was like, God, you know, you do board and trains, and it's like I could just zone out and just train the dog and focus on the dog. But if you try to do that while the owner's just like sitting there, you're going to lose them completely, you know? So your multitasking skills have to be like perfect.
Good point.
So very cool. So you're working for a daycare initially. That was kind of like your first gig. And you said that you kind of made your way up to like a general manager position there and stuff. Where along the lines of like doing that and the dog sitting and the at-home stuff and all that kind of stuff, where along the lines do you feel like you started gaining the actual skills you needed to start growing like a staff and like managing the facility and stuff like that? Like, do you think that impacted quite a bit with that?
You mean like in terms of once I opened because like when I was at home, I couldn't really.
Sure.
But do you mean
with process? So like, you know, like with working for the daycare and stuff like that, like do you feel like a lot of the skills that you needed to like learn about the actual running of the business portion of things?
I was when I was running that place, I was terrible. Like I was the worst boss. It was awful. I actually met my wife at that daycare. In the first year, I thought she was super weird and she thought I was super nasty. And like we like literally didn't talk. And I wasn't wrong and she wasn't wrong. Like I was a terrible boss. I was younger. I didn't know what I was doing. Sure. I would like try to be friends with everyone, then I would blow up and explode. I hired all the wrong people. Like, but that's certainly how I've learned. So, and I still say this now, like opening process, I was like, okay, I've got the dog thing down. I've got the client thing down. Like my job and still my number one job is my staff. Yeah. It's like constantly this like culture and these people that you're like really working to kind of preserve and make sure everyone's like rowing the boat in the same direction type of thing. So it helped me learn, but also like lots of reading, talking to other people, and being older helps too. You know what I mean? Like it helps get perspective.
A little more emotional maturity with it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Definitely can help.
The other big adjustment was I'd been working by myself, like at home. So like the first 2 days, I was like socially so exhausted. I was like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
and now I like, you thrive, like going to work with people, there's something about it. But
Yeah.
I was like worn out.
I remember that first year you got 2 really bad colds and like
I got sick.
you were
I never
actually
get sick
you were
because I
home.
didn't go
I think
anywhere.
there was one time when you stayed home and you're like, this never happened.
never
You're
get
like, I
sick.
haven't gotten sick in years. I'm like, yeah, well, welcome to like the public.
didn't leave. I
Like,
didn't go
yeah,
anywhere.
like people are germy. Yeah.
It's interesting, like getting the wheel turning is like the hardest part, like when anytime you're going through any sort of big changes with the company or starting it in the first place or whatever, it's like, God, getting the wheel turning, getting the people started rowing in the right direction is so freaking exhausting and so difficult, but then you hit that point where it's like the momentum takes over and everything's just kind of working, and that's when, like you were saying, like thriving, like you could just enjoy going to work and just doing your job and being around the people, and it doesn't require as much effort.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's huge, and that's something that I have like horrible social skills. I feel like or I used to feel like that, right? And so like the idea of running a business and this and that like was just that wasn't even something that like crossed my mind, So I tried to just like go about looking at things like I would look at like training dogs. If this is just systematical and I have to do this, and I have to do that, and then it'll just kind of work. And it just doesn't operate that way, right? So for me, like my biggest hacks with that kind of stuff is just like hiring good people to be able to assist with that process.
Yeah.
Like I know that is like I know that I'm good at training dogs, and I know that I am bad at like developing good culture, So I hire people to help with that process and help me to be better at those types of things,
Yeah.
How many people do you guys have?
12.
12.
Yeah. 12 people. Well, we staff. The other thing is, we're staffed 24/7.
Yeah.
So it like increases the amount. You need a deeper bench.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I have some like really part time.
Sure.
Like that includes someone who does like overnights occasionally.
I got you.
But yeah, it's a big. I never thought I'd have 12.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's crazy when you get into like double digits. And
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus Christ. Like you're looking at your payroll and it's like,
Yeah.
you're like, that's a lot of people.
Like I'll see like there's been a couple times I'm like, wait a minute. But yeah, it's big. Yeah.
Super cool. Daycare is extremely like labor intensive. That is one thing. Like I remember like when we cut it, like during COVID, it was just like the amount of people you need to run such a singular service. It's nuts, Cool. So you started getting into doing the at-home stuff. You were doing the dog sitting, the dog walking, all those types of things. How long did you have dogs like at your house all the time for?
That was like 9 years, maybe.
Really?
Wow.
Maybe 6. It's all a blur. My wife would
You
know
told me
exactly.
8. You told me 8 originally.
Maybe, yeah. I'm really bad at the timeline.
that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was Lakewood for 3
Yeah.
years, Cleveland Heights for 4.
Yeah.
And you constantly were having boarding dogs in or this
always.
or that.
Yeah,
Wow.
always. Like it was, and I kept like, I mean, looking back, like, in a lot of these clients are people who built my business for me. Like even now, these are people that I'm still in touch with. And I would do things like I never went out of town. Like I was very committed. Like you want to pick up at 10 p.m., come on down. Like I was really like stuff now that I know to set better boundaries about.
Yeah.
But those are still people that like, this, like you get some key referral people that still turn your business through.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that I did it. I probably would have done things different earlier.
Yeah.
But we're here.
The problem is there's no way to like not there's no, like you were saying, like not going out of town and stuff like that. Like I use my mom as an example sometimes because she runs a child daycare service and she's been doing that out of her house for like 30 years,
Yeah.
And it's the same deal where like she has to be so conscious and plan out her year like ahead of time as far as if she's going out of town or this or that, because some people rely so heavily on your business, and you know how easy it is in the case of say boarding. Like one day, let's say you can't board somebody's dog for a big trip, 2 weeks, they're going to find somewhere else that they have to be able to take that dog to.
Yeah.
Right.
And you then potentially run the risk of losing a long-time customer because of that. That's a really hard part. And boarding is definitely not like the priority of our business, but we do have a lot of dogs that come to us for boarding that can't really be boarded anywhere else due to whatever type of issues that they have. And that's a part of the reason we're kind of expanding space-wise as well right now, because we just, especially in the last like 2 years, just started really blowing up with boarding, with everything going on, and we don't want to have to turn anybody away because of it.
Right.
Right. It's a hard thing to balance, And I know even in your position, like I think I heard through the grapevine or something, you guys have like quite an extensive wait list for your daycare and stuff, right?
Yeah. So we put, like a cap on the number of dogs. So we used to just be, you did a trial day, things went well, come in any time. And like we kind of could just like taper. We knew like this range of dogs that were going to come. And that started to grow. We put a wait list on trial days, which is dogs coming in. And then we started, like we changed our system. Now we do reservations for daycare.
Yeah.
So our facility max out at 95 dogs a day. Wow. So that includes everyone that's there.
Everything though. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was steady from February. This past year, we just started taking new dogs in.
Yeah.
Again, and it's just like we feel bad. Like so many people got dogs. You know this.
Yeah.
But
puppies.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
What's the balance of that from like boarding to daycare, for example, like 95?
In the summer, it would be like 20 dogs boarding.
Yeah.
The way we do our boarding, it's not necessarily like a set number of dogs. It's a lot of who we've got. Yeah. So 10 6-month-old Dobermans is a lot more work than like my regular dogs that come all the time. Yeah. So you're kind of looking at like the cohesiveness of the group and who's my regulars, who's new. So there's some dogs that are really easy to get in if we're full. There's some dogs that aren't. The summer was hard too because you get like these strings of week vacations. Yeah. So you get a bunch of dogs leaving on Sunday and a bunch of dogs coming in on Saturday. Yeah. So Saturday is really busy. And so it's always just sort of this balancing act of like looking at the dogs and, you know, and then also like, a lot of dogs, it's their first day. They don't know what's going on. Like it takes a while for dogs to get used to the setup and things like that. So,
So when you look at like 70 dogs potentially like coming to daycare, right? Like that's one thing that I've always looked at as far as a lot of the daycares around us, like that do 90 dogs, 100 dogs, stuff like that. And I look at that and I'm just like, oh my God, that just gives me so much anxiety thinking about it.
Yeah.
What, like, obviously you're doing things different. Like we always preach, like when it comes to looking for daycares, find daycares that have a good emphasis on training and understanding of the animal behavior so that your safety is higher naturally, right? So what sorts of things do you guys do when you have a group that large in order to keep the zen?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that we have in the building helped us a lot is different areas. So we have the big outdoor yard. We have a front room. We call the ballroom. It's an actual toy room, which is a whole other thing that we do. We have another room in the back. We have 2 like crate areas, the upstairs space and downstairs. And then we can divide another space up. So essentially
you keep the group smaller.
It depends. So like it's really focused on the dog's needs throughout the day. So like, yes, I have maybe, we have some standard rules that we like to follow. So one is groups of 2. So let's say I've got 10 dogs in the yard and they're like, sometimes they beautifully pair off and they play with each other. But if all of a sudden that group starts moving together, hey, we're going to break them up. So maybe this dog's going to take a crate break. Maybe this dog's going to go in this room. So there's a learning curve for staff and you just have to know your dogs really well. So now like, we know all the dogs that are there. We know their quirks and, so some dogs come in and they're out the whole time. Like our front room is for like nap, like if dogs want to hang out, but we don't have to put them up. And it's only for dogs that can read the room. So I can't have a group of, and we have dogs that are boarding. So it's not just like young dogs that are there to play. So let's say I have dogs that are just like trying to nap on the beds and, kind of a regular group. And then I bring in like I said, like a 8-month-old lab. And they're like spinning around the room. Yes, like those are like when you talk about daycare issues, those are the biggest ones. And, and then you get these dogs that are napping that are like, all right, well, I'm going to snap at any dog that comes near me because this is how I get space. And then you get these puppies that are like, well, if I start running, I might get bit, so I'm going to start also biting the dogs that are running. So it's like managing energy and play. It's the summer's a little easier. The dogs get tired, it gets hot. But it's your staff has to know what they're doing, and we preach is rotation. So there's like a balance of, yes, we could spend time training this behavior, but a lot of daycares focus on management. So like moving dogs. There's some other like basic rules. Like we don't let the dogs do like a lot of like dog packy stuff. Like we don't let them go bark at the fence. Even like howling at sirens, stuff that's like funny and innocent. Like we are always intervening ourselves. Like they can't bust their rooms and things. So some basic
things that get them like just respecting you guys
100%. Like wow, these people are relevant and they're not just like chasing after us. Can
I add to that?
Please do.
A big part of, so I still do daycare for I don't know 2.5 hours in the morning depending on the day, and a big part of it is moving dogs just constantly throughout the room. So there's like essentially 5 different areas the dogs can be in, because we have our big outdoor yard and then we also have a smaller fenced in area of that yard. and that's like an indoor outdoor space. So in that, like, so if staff is rotating throughout those areas that we're watching. So if I'm in, like, we call it the back bay is the area, the smaller fenced in area. And if I go in and I'm in there for 20 minutes or so, and when I leave the same exact dogs are still in there, then I've done something wrong. So the dogs really depending, and what Amanda said, like a lot of it's depending on what the dogs need throughout the day. It's not just this dog does better in this yard. It's like right now this dog has a lot of energy. So if they run in the main yard, they're going to get tagged by their dogs. Other dogs will chase them and try to catch them with their mouth. But if they go, so we call it like the back bay, they can kind of mingle around. But like, okay, now that dog is tired and they've laid down, and they'll snap at any dog who walks by them. So that's why they can go to the front room and they can nap, because dogs in the front room respect dogs who need to nap. So it's just like constant moving. I mean, I'll see Amanda like pop in every once in a while. She'll grab 7 dogs and send 6 more back in. I mean, they move a lot. We don't want dogs to get stuck in a place where nobody's helping them.
That's a really great way to look at it, because I feel like a lot of the other places that will do it, they don't have that level of thought and attention to it. It's more so like, well, this dog's starting to become a problem, so we'll give them a break.
Right.
Right. It's not being more proactive about reading these situations and adjusting based on what that dog needs. You know?
Yeah.
And this has always been my internal dilemma with like daycare type settings and stuff, even when we were doing ours and everything, is understanding what the individual dog needs, and understanding that some of these dogs, 12 hours is so long.
Oh, so long.
It's so freaking long.
Yeah.
And the owners want them to be just out and playing the whole freaking time. You know what I mean? And, I might know that some of these dogs that come in would benefit from just 1 hour of just like running around and playing and having a good time, and then they're fine. Right? And then you start pushing that envelope, you start creating more problems. But it's balancing like then having a good enough relationship with that owner to have that conversation of, listen, like, you're going to bring your dog to this, and I promise you they're going to have a great time, and they're going to be really, really impacted from this experience, but they're only going to be out for 45 minutes or an hour or something like that.
Right.
You have to get them to trust you with that. And that's a part of elbowing things. That's a part of, we're currently in the process of restructuring and adding back in our daycare once our new facility is kind of renovated and stuff. And one of the things that I'm trying to really cater it more towards, which is another thing I was excited to talk to you guys about, is more of kind of an enrichment day kind of thing, where it's not contingent on the dog playing with other dogs the entire freaking day, right? Like, there are other things we could do to stimulate this dog to make sure that they're getting the most out of the socialization. Because socialization, we were talking about this with the idea of service dogs and stuff, it's so important, right? Like, teaching a dog to interact properly with dogs, humans, and environments is like the key of all good training, I think. Right? And the commands and the obedience and stuff like that you teach just facilitates being able to do that better. Right? So by adding in all of these other enrichment services, we can justify having a dog at our facility for an entire day while spending only the amount of time that we need actually socializing the dog to help them keep moving along. Right? Because I don't care so much about, I think boarding is very essential. Daycare, I think, is essential from the standpoint of teaching good social skills. But if you really break it down and somebody like couldn't take their dog to daycare for a month, like, that dog's gonna be okay if they sit in a crate all day, So I'm really trying to look at like, how do we keep moving that service in the right direction? And like I said, like, that's the thing I've always respected about you guys. I think you guys are doing a really good job of that right now.
Thank you.
These are some really, really interesting points and ideas you're bringing up as far as how you do it.
Thank you. It can be conflicting for me. So, like, obviously I'm a trainer and like, that's my mindset, but a lot of my clients are not here for that. Like, a lot of my clients are not part of our training service. So there's certainly like a balance where there's some dogs that I'm like, man, like, and we'll tell people, like, we definitely will say like, hey, you should bring your dog less, or, and that's important, especially an age thing. Like, we'll get a lot of dogs that are like Goldens at their first 2 years. This is great. And then they're kind of done. And it's a hard conversation. Like, owners get really upset. I'm like, hey, your dog really doesn't need this. But it's a balance. Or like, sometimes we just like maybe I have a dog that someone's like, I can't leave this dog alone. And like the trainer in me is like,
kind of like, that's a trainer.
I think you should. Like, I think you should. But at the same time, I sort of enable it, because I'm like, okay, yes, this dog comes to daycare. So it's always kind of this balance of like wearing both hats and being respectful of the people that, but yeah, I mean, we talk about this a lot. Like, daycare is a gift and a curse. Like, we obviously, it's what we do, and we do it the best we can. But certainly, like, people say, like, could my dog get hurt? Yes. can my dog learn bad habits? Yes. You know, like you raise the risk of these things. So yeah.
So I really appreciate that you guys have made these different spots. You know, like you were saying, some dogs just want to chill, you know?
Yeah.
So my girlfriend used to work at a daycare that shall not be named.
Okay.
But they had a couple of red flags that you guys have mitigated. You know, the first thing was they never put a cap on their intake.
Wow.
And they were a bit of a smaller facility, but it was just like, everybody come on in,
Yeah.
you know? And then they would just be overloaded, and then there's no place, because they were, like I said, a small facility. And then you'd have those dogs that are trying to like chill, but they're literally getting trampled
Yeah.
because there's no
Yeah.
place, you know? And they never like came up with a system like a reservation or timeout for some of these other dogs.
Right.
You know, it just got like worse and worse. She had to leave because it was just so stressful.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just stressful for the dogs, but the people were like losing their minds
For
because
sure.
it's like you have to worry about something every moment, you know, and you guys have been able to like mitigate that.
Yeah.
From
to
not
the best of your abilities. You know, I mean, again,
Right.
like
Yeah.
you were saying, there will always be risks.
yeah,
associated
always
with
risk.
it, you
Yeah,
know?
but you've definitely taken so many steps to like mitigate.
Yeah, thank you.
anything,
Yeah,
you know?
we're a little obsessed with it.
Yeah.
In terms of that, and I think staff coming, I would say like 60 or 70% of my staff came from like other daycares.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I love, sometimes I don't. But and like we'll say the same kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
like they'll be like, or they have habits. Like they'll hear a small noise and they'll be like,
Yeah.
and I'll
That's
just
the
be like,
worst
what are
one.
you doing?
Yeah,
you know,
we're
like
not
I'll just be
freaking
like,
out.
you need to, like I've had staff literally, I'll be like, hey, you need to like chill.
Yeah.
Everything's okay. Let's just like look. And they'll be like, I'm sorry, it's just a bad habit. You know, they'll start like
Yeah,
yelling and like
yeah.
running.
You get so like
And I'm
tweaked out. You know, like we see
and
that
I'm like,
all the
I'm
time
like,
too.
everything's okay. You know, like we're even if there is conflict, I'm like, okay, like let's just like my staff, I'll be standing, I'm like, okay, let's like actually just watch this for a minute, you know,
Yeah.
and see this kind
Yeah.
of thing. But
Having war flashbacks.
yeah, like they literally, they'll be like PTSD.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, hey, you know, you're okay. Like everything's okay.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, what do I do? I'm like, we're gonna move the dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. You know.
Oh, that's it.
Quietly.
Yeah.
It's always funny watching like either people who have worked at other daycares before or people who haven't, right? It's always funny watching how everybody handles their first like dog altercation.
Yeah.
You know? Like, it's like-
Yeah.
we'll see it sometimes like something will happen and like you'll see like two dogs start fighting or something and you just kind of like look around.
Yeah.
And you'll see everybody's just like
Yeah. Or some people like run in the middle, but they're not doing anything. They're, just, like, they're also freaking out. But yeah,
Yeah.
those are good learning moments. And I always tell my staff, I'm like, anytime there's something, we miss something.
sure.
You
Yeah.
know, like
100%.
like, we, those are always, and clients, they'll be like, it happened out of nowhere. I'm like,
Yeah.
no.
It didn't.
It's
though.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice how we have cameras like that we can roll back. I'm like, hey,
That was
Do the
such
stuff.
a essential investment
Yeah.
on our part was having that just to be able to review footage and be able to see like, okay, cool, we could have saw that
Yep.
coming or we could have saw that coming and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, like at this point, like not that we have like dog fights happening all the time,
Yeah.
but like if something happens, it's like I feel like my blood pressure doesn't even go up anymore. Like it's like it's happening, it's just like, all right, well, we're gonna go address this.
Yep.
All right,
That's
okay, cool, we're good.
exactly,
You know?
and it's inevitable. And I'll tell the staff, I'm like, it's gonna happen again.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is gonna happen. Here's what you learned from it.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
something- oh,
oh
I'm
no, go
sorry.
ahead.
Okay,
No,
I
quit
had this thought.
apologizing.
Okay.
You're being too nice.
That's a Kate habit.
It is. Amanda's really helped me every time I say sorry. She's like, "You gotta stop."
Yeah.
Gotten much
like,
better.
sorry.
Gotten much better. What Josh was saying earlier about the daycare that your girlfriend used to work at, and you're talking about the dogs who really want to rest and how stressful it is for them. And what I've figured out, so I didn't have daycare experience before Amanda, but I've become friends with so many people who are currently coworkers and previous coworkers from Process, and they told me all the stories from their previous daycares and stuff that they've worked at, and there's so much about that dog who wants to rest, and that concept, like Amanda has helped me realize, like Amanda's always for helping the dog. So like
Advocacy,
that
like,
dog
big.
who's snapping, it's not snapping. Like
Yeah.
there's so many reasons for that. And a lot of it, especially if a dog is trying to rest, it's so warranted. And Amanda's like, okay, so what should you do? Like, we always say, well, I have like, I don't know, Frankie in the back bay, and he's just snapping and everyone walks by them. And she's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
what is he doing? I'm like, oh, he's laying there. And granted, I know this now. Maybe this was old
Yeah.
too, but yeah. And I was like, she's like, okay, well, he needs to rest. Like, let's put him in the rest room or the front room
Yeah.
where he can nap. And that's a big difference between like what I've heard, like what we do versus what I've heard from other daycares. It's like we blame, or they seem to tend to blame that dog who's snapping. So like, oh, he's not a nice dog, or he's aggressive,
Sure.
or and we hate.
He's got
I hate
really
those,
mean.
Yeah, and I hate those labels because like
Yeah.
and it's just it's so unfair to the dog. It's unfair to the owner. And some dogs, like, they get really addicted to dog play, and that's a whole different thing. They get really addicted, and then sometimes they're like, okay, now I'm actually like getting a little older and I'm tired, or I'm sore, or like, great, that was fun, but now I want to rest. And when you don't let those dogs do that, that's really where the conflict comes from. But I love Amanda's approach of like, let's help the dogs versus instead of blaming the dogs. I think was a big difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, if you put it in like a human term, like, you know, we've talked about before, like if you're at like a party or whatever, and you're like, okay, social media is done.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
But
I turn into a real asshole.
yeah, but then
Too.
but you know, it's like one of those goodbyes you can't get away, and you're just like, I just want to go home, but you're Midwest goodbying me, you know?
Yeah.
You know, you get irritated,
I'm
you know?
out. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
It's,
out. Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. It's like
Yeah.
they can't, but then they can't go anywhere. It's like,
Exactly.
I'm
They have
stuck in
no
this huge
Yeah.
group.
Yeah,
They have
no
nowhere
choice.
to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
And-
Indiana the Midwest?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Midwest ends at like Iowa, and
I
then
think
it's just West.
I'm not
right?
familiar with the Midwest goodbye because this is not the Midwest, right?
This is Midwest.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's like the
Ohio's
north,
Midwest,
it's northeast,
Yeah.
isn't
North Midwest, whatever.
it? North Midwest.
Yeah, you're still part of the breadbasket, buddy. That's what they call it. Look at that! I'm giving you geographical knowledge today.
I like it. I like it. I'm not a geography guy. Okay, so touching on advocacy for a minute. This is an interesting one because you got like 3 different ways you could look at it, right? So when most people talk about advocacy, and circling 9,000 times here, right? So you were talking about a lot of people will blame the dog that's snapping in those situations, right? Which is accurate. I feel like people that don't have a training knowledge will do that, right?
Yeah.
They'll be like, this dog
Yep.
is being aggressive. That dog needs to be corrected or disciplined or this
Yep.
or that or whatever, right? Which we know is not the case. We know the dog is just grumpy and he's trying to create some space, and that's the only way they know how to do it, right? Then you have more of the training philosophy of advocacy, or the more preached training philosophy of advocacy, which is blame the other dog for it. Well, that dog is not reading that dog's cues well, so that dog needs to be corrected, or that dog needs to be disciplined for, which I think, in my opinion, is almost equally unfair. Because the dog's not really doing anything wrong. They're just trying to play, right? And then this dog is grumpy and has hit the end of their meter. It might be being maybe a little bit irrationally grumpy, or getting a little over the top with it because it keeps repeatedly happening to them. But we can't expect every dog in that room just to like know right off the rip every single dog that's grumpy and be constantly aware of them at all times and stuff like that. So I also think, you know, a lot of like modern teaching of socialization and stuff like that puts too much emphasis on disciplining and correcting dogs for not doing anything wrong as well on that standpoint, right? Which also further inhibits the social process. So that's why I really like your idea of just reading it and being more proactive about it and just separating as opposed to worrying too much about addressing one way or another.
Right.
Because here's the thing, like if we were just having 3 dogs out, right? And that dog wanted to rest and the other 2 still wanted to play. Yes, because it's a smaller group, I would expect those dogs to be a little bit more aware of each dog's kind of temperament and where they were at in that exact moment, and understand after maybe one correction, oh, maybe I'll just stay away from this dog.
Right.
But when you're dealing with groups of 40, 50, even 20 or 10, right? We can't expect them all to understand that. And each time it happens from another dog to that dog over there, it's going to get progressively worse, which is going to increase the likelihood of like a fight or something happening.
Yeah.
So advocacy is such a strange thing because and this goes back to like a lot of our socials we're trying to do now with like our boarding dogs and stuff. We're trying to keep such small groups, so we have to advocate as little as possible. And as you increase that group, your need to advocate becomes higher. Like there's no working around it, right? You have to make these adjustments and these things and stuff. But like I said, for the purpose of increasing the dog's social skills, I want to put them in as many small situations as possible where I could basically become an irrelevant party and allow them to kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
It's funny, the first daycare that I worked at, it was like the concept of like I would be there and I was training board and trains, I was doing one-on-one sessions, and I was running daycare, and there was at times like just me in the building while I was doing it. You know?
Good luck, everybody.
We had we had a daycare yard out back. And we would only have maybe 10, 15 dogs, something like that. But the idea was just stick them in the daycare yard and then go inside and go train your dogs. And I'll tell you, we did that for like a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. And I could probably count on one hand how many fights we had. There were not issues, you know, because it's so interesting when you have a moderate sized group, when you step back and you just don't do anything, 9 out of 10 times, most things you think are going to be an issue are not an issue. Right. It only becomes, again, more important as you increase the size of that group. It becomes a little bit more difficult. But if you're in a situation with you guys where you have as much space as you have, you start to mitigate that problem as well, which is why there's a lot of trainers out there. Like, are you familiar with like Nelson Hodges or
heard the name?
Like
I don't know if I follow his work as much as, does he do the big like
large group socialization?
Yeah. Okay.
Right? He's out in like Texas, I believe. And listen, I'm not an expert on this guy by any means. I just know some of his general concepts. But he does these socials in these freaking fields that are just like acres and acres.
Yeah.
Where they'll have 40, 50 dogs. And because there's so much space, they could kind of pack off and do their thing. Cool. And they understand where like how you guys are separating things by rooms. These dogs just organically do it on their own.
Right.
It's so interesting. Cool. But they have to have the space in order to do it.
Right.
And again, as you add more dogs and your space decreases, you have to be the person that's making those changes yourself.
Yeah.
I want to know about their recall ability, like what they do, like how they practice recall. Because that's like, you're running acres if you have to.
They're typically fenced in areas at that point and stuff. Okay. So like we're talking, these guys are doing them on like ranches.
Yeah.
Where it's like, they have these pastures like basically for horses where the dog's not going to get out. Like, it might take you,
a minute to find
20 minutes to go catch them.
Yeah.
But,
thinking.
So very, very interesting. Okay, so another question. You were talking about you guys, being in the position that you're at and having some of the clients that are just coming to you guys for daycare or boarding or this or that. You could be put in a little bit of a pickle sometimes. So with Heights, that's one of the biggest reasons why I left is because we did that as well, right? So our daycare and our boarding and everything was open to non-training clients. So we started hitting a point where it was like we were basically getting outnumbered by like 75% of the dogs are untrained, 25% of them are trained, and as that number started to get more and more skewed, things got more and more out of control. And I remember I tell stories about like, there was this doodle that I was sending home one time from daycare, and I was walking it into the front room, and this dog just would rip your freaking arm out of the socket, like back flipping on the leash and stuff like that. And I made the dog heel with me going up there. I made the dog sit and wait at the door. And the freaking lady yelled at me over it. She's like, "What are you doing? Don't make my dog do that." I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Of course, it's a doodle.
I had this constant internal kind of dilemma where it was like I would be doing lessons and stuff sometimes, and anytime we'd have this dog just being a freaking asshole going home, it's like I'd be like finding myself just like, I didn't train that dog.
Yeah.
Don't worry, guys. Like don't judge me based on this one and stuff. And I felt like it almost took away from the work we were trying to do as a training company at times. So how do you manage some of that? Like internally, is that more of just developing the relationship with those clients that don't do the training so they at least understand like, hey, this is what we do still, and your dog can come and enjoy those services, but you guys have to kind of be mindful of some of this philosophy and stuff as well, or?
Yeah. I don't know, Kate, you can always, I don't mean to take all the questions.
No,
if you have,
I just think
these are questions for both.
Yeah. I feel like I keep jumping in. I'm like,
no, that's all right. All I was going to say is that I think having the separate training center is huge.
Well, yeah.
That's a great point.
And that's all I was going to say.
Yeah.
You can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, there's moments where, like, especially when it comes to like crating, like, a lot of our dogs, like you can't leave them on the floor for 12 hours, like for so many reasons, like they're learning bad habits or whatever. And like, if an owner's like, no, I don't want my dog in a crate today, like that's just not a choice you get to make.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry, like so some of it, like those types of things, as far as like me standing in my lobby watching pickups, sometimes it's hard. My staff's really good at being like, hey, do you want me to leash the dog up before you? There's some dogs that my staff will just take the leash and walk right out.
Yeah.
But I generally go on the philosophy of like with daycare clients or that aren't interested in training. If they don't ask, I don't tend to.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like we have a saying that actually came from a Patricia McConnell book, which I think came from a kid's book. Your dog, your joy, your choice.
Sure.
And we like kind of remind ourselves of that a lot with non-training clients. Now, if you want help, like. Yeah, like sometimes people ask for help and I'm like, yes, like finally, yes, here we go.
Great.
But it's sort of just like,
that's a really interesting and good way to look at it. Obviously, like it's their, in the end of the day, it's their choices, what they want to do with their dogs, right? So let me ask you this follow-up question to that then. What is your motive? This is probably the biggest question, right?
I'm sitting up straight.
What's your motivation through all of this, right? Like, what are you really trying to do with Process Canine? Like, what's your big goal?
Yeah.
You know?
That's always changing. I think, like, as far as daycare and boarding goes, I love providing daycare in a way that I think is really healthy.
Sure.
The boarding, we're really kind of passionate about providing that as well in a way that I think like is the best experience for the dogs that have to board at a facility. It's like, here's how this goes.
Sure.
As far as like future goals, like our training, it's just Kate and I.
Yeah.
So like expanding that. There was a period of time we were looking to do an indoor pool that's kind of like gone on the wayside, like somewhere else. I'm very into like our enrichment camp, which we'll talk about, is small. We love that so much. So like as far as like expanding that, but I'm pretty happy with like yes, there's a wait list and there's a cap. But I love that like the dogs that come, like, yes, it's 95, but it's 95 dogs we know really well.
Yeah.
It was just like, they know the drill, so
it's more about just providing overall a healthy environment for the dog.
Yes.
Right. More than anything.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of what I meant with it. Like I always said, I'm more catered towards like the dogs that can't go anywhere else, just because like that's our specialty, right? That's our bread and butter is working with the behavioral cases. So a lot of our services we offer are catered around that, which is why things like having untrained dogs and stuff like that can be so disruptive to that to us. But and by no means saying it's bad, but in your case, by just providing a safe and healthy environment for everybody, right, it becomes significantly more understandable, and it becomes way less of a big deal. I feel like, right?
Yeah.
I could help you with your issues that you're having over here, right? And we can make sure that if you got to go out of town, your dog's gonna have a good experience and this and that. But it's more centered around what the owner wants, right? Where ours is a little bit more centered around, I feel like, just those dogs that wouldn't fit into that kind of environment. So, which I think is really cool, and that's the one thing I've always had a ton of respect for is, we've had dogs that you've sent our way and stuff like that before that, like, it sounds like probably just weren't a good fit for your guys' camp and stuff. And we provide a good environment for them. And, it's a really cool mutual thing. Like, with your wait list, it gets difficult, but people on the inside that are looking for daycares, like, you're the name that I drop to them,
Yeah, it's been hard for us, but for sure, like, we meet, especially like things that, as far as like training skills, like when there's like dog to dog issues or like even like some aggression and type things, like basically things that I'm like, this is not super in my wheelhouse. Call David. So we're like, if someone,
She's
or
even
like
said that to me, like, okay, if you have a client and they say this, and this, just tell them to call David.
or just like, if someone says, any training really, I'm just like, go here, go to Miracle Canine. So it's always been.
Well, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not necessarily outside of your wheelhouse. I think like when you're dealing with certain dogs like that, like just like untrained dogs can be disruptive to our business, like dogs like that can be extremely disruptive to your business. Because if you start looking at like, you have all these dogs in these areas and this and that, and then you got these 2 dogs in the back that have to be ran in this completely different way and interacted with in this different way and done this and that, like that's going to shut down like temporarily, like a lot of the things that you guys are doing, so you could accommodate those things.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
it becomes very difficult
to
incorporate that into it. We would run into that again at Heights because we were doing untrained dogs, trained dogs, this, that, and it was more of, especially the South Yucca location was much more of just like daycare and boarding than it was like super training intensive. That's a part of the reason why we opened our West Side location, is that became like the behind the scenes training place. But when we would get dogs in that had aggression issues, it was like, I would have to go there at like 1 a.m. to train dogs. And like, I would be the only one that could interact with certain dogs there. So I'd be coming there like in the morning and the evening because the staff just wasn't trained to be able to handle those types of things.
Right.
We didn't have the procedures and stuff in place. So it became extremely disruptive either to the staff or to me because nobody else could help with it. It became a big mess for sure. Yeah. So that's really interesting. I think that's really cool. Okay. So tell me about your enrichment day stuff. I've seen you posting a lot about it lately. So like, how do you guys structure those? What do you do?
Yeah. So enrichment camp is something we'd always wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily want to stick it on a staff member. And then I was just worried about who was going to do it, because it was something that I was like, I don't necessarily want to spend my day doing this, but I want one person to do. So my wife, who's an incredible dog trainer, but did like a real person job. was like looking to go part-time and stuff. And so I was like, hey, do you want to run this? And so she runs that.
She's awesome.
Yeah, she's really good. So we run that on Tuesday and Thursday. Right now it's only open to daycare clients. Just because like the dogs are in daycare before and they can go back after. Yeah. So there's 6 spots each of those days. It runs out of the training center. And basically those 6 dogs, it's really based, like there is some light training, especially like a number of the dogs that go are dogs we've done training with. And it's like, oh yeah, for sure, we'll proof these things. But it's really about finding what's enriching to the dog. So like they're usually, they kind of get rotated like out of a pen or a crate. Hey, you're going to come out, do your like 20 minutes of toy play. Like we spend more time on stuff that we'd love to do with our training dogs, but it's not really the focus of why they're there. Yeah. So some toy play, they're learning scent work, which is awesome. Sometimes they're going for walks. Like it really depends on what the dog is doing. It's kind of dependent on having a dog who's like motivated by food or toys. Yeah. Because we're not going to like make a dog compulsory do enrichment.
Yeah.
Like find this scent, So then they're like, their day is probably like they start around like 9 and go till 3. It's some dogs will finish earlier or later and then they can go back into daycare. Yeah. So it's an extra service, but it's been great. Our clients, like a lot of the spots now are just dogs who have standing spots, which is cool because then the group kind of like one dog's on a place bed, one dog's on the treadmill, one dog's playing toys. Like now they can kind of get a more cohesive thing. But that we'd love to do that more. Yeah. It's just kind of finding,
the dilemma of who is going to do this service.
Right. Because, and like in an employee's defense, like, there's days if like someone's sick or something, but now I've got 6 dogs that signed up for the service and it takes, it's a full day.
Yeah.
So kind of figuring out how that's going to balance. And
Sure.
We ran into that issue a lot. Like when we first started adding like daycare and boarding at our, Cleveland location at Miracle now. Because when Miracle first started, even like we would have maybe, at any given time, 5 to 10 boarding dogs and 7 to 10 boarding trains in at a time or something. So we would have at tops like 20 dogs there. Yeah. And at the time, it was very easy to say, oh, yeah, daycare, adding walks onto this service or doing this or doing that. Like, we'll find people to be able to do those types of things. And it would kind of be something where when the trainer was done with their boarding trains, all right, we'll take these 2 dogs for a walk or do this or do that. And then it's funny, like as that grew, right? And as we started getting to like higher boarding numbers, higher boarding train numbers, higher daycare numbers, it's like, oh shit, like we didn't create the right infrastructure to be able to actually sustain this service that we were offering. We started running into people who were just like their day was just too overloaded where they couldn't get to some of that stuff, which was a part of the removing the daycare and stuff like that. And when we go to re-add back in whatever type of like enrichment service and stuff we wind up doing, it's making sure that infrastructure is correct where it can be scaled a little bit easier, It's funny, like we can look at these services we want to offer as like, yeah, this is fun and this is cool and this is that, but you have to constantly like check yourself and be like, is this businessly like applicable? Businessly? Is this businessly applicable? So very cool. Okay, so what do you define as enrichment? What is enrichment to you?
That's a good question.
Or to both of you. This is another both of you question.
Yeah. I'll give my answer.
Sure. And then,
But you can't copy it.
Okay. I won't.
This is mine. It's dog dependent, 100%. So what's enriching to the dog? Meaning what do they like to do?
Sure.
Now, some dogs, there's things that like, I think they really like to do, but they're not doing it for whatever reason. Like, I think this dog would really love tug, but he's like a little not sure. And then it's a game of kind of like pushing that out of them. Same with scent work and things like that. Ultimately, like, I mean, some dogs enrichment like is not being asked to do anything. Like some dogs are like, I would prefer to not
jump.
Like, or to just like nap. And, and I also don't think it's like, I don't know. I would just say it's something the dog enjoys to do. And ideally we're channeling that into something that's productive. So like if a dog loves to chase squirrels, but doesn't chase a ball, like we want to make that transition. If a dog, so those kinds of things. So sort of using like functional dog exercises in a way that, we can teach a dog to enjoy those.
Okay. So it's more of kind of what the dog just enjoys to do.
Yeah, like what they're naturally inclined to
and
do.
Finding something productive for that.
Yes.
I like that.
Megan, who's the trainer and Amanda's wife, I talked to her. So I spend a lot of my day with her when she's doing enrichment. I'm doing the board and trains and the rookie campers and stuff. And it's very cool. Like she'll say, it's really cool how she gets these drives out of the dog. So some dogs, like, we have like a really confident male lab and, his drives are there. you present a tug toy and he's like, "Arr," and he bites it and he's like, he's going in. But there's dogs that we bring in and she's like, okay, well, the dog is half poodle and I know that like there's some drive in there, so like we gotta tap into it. So it's really cool to see like even a dog who like likes food, isn't really wanting to work for food, but if they chase the food, that's totally different. So so it works both ways in terms of like toy drive and food drive. It's like sometimes dogs are like, oh, if it's moving, I want it. And there's certain dogs, like I've sent my dog to enrichment camp a couple times and his toy drive is low. Something I haven't worked on. He'll play with me basically and Amanda, but I have to get him started and that's about it. He'll play with one tug toy with my roommate. I'm like, of course, he'll play with somebody else, not me. But it's cool. I was talking to Megan about that, and I was asking her because she said that she prefers for dogs to either have toy drive and food drive, or they can just have a really strong drive either way. They should have some food drive. But I was asking her about my dog, Petey. I was like, well, you know, what does that mean for dogs who have like really high food drive? And he's like, no, like, or she said, like, if he's willing to do anything for food and he'll do anything for his kibble, that's totally different. And he doesn't do toys, but that's fine because there's so many different activities that you can add that are enriching to a dog who's really food driven. I don't know. She's just very good at tapping into those drives and figuring out like what's the most exciting to dogs. A lot of the dogs like the agility. So if they won't take food and they won't take toys, sometimes we just use leash pressure over the agility structures. And then they like, once they get that down, they're like, ooh, and they get confident. And then they might start taking food. If you toss a treat at the end of the A-frame, then they're like, oh, that's moving. And I had to get over this fear to get over this thing. And like, okay, now I think I can like do more with that. So it's really cool when you see the dogs like start to figure out like, okay, this is awesome. Like this is fun. I like this kind of thing. She's really, really good at that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've in that point with the agility equipment. That's it's such and forget agility equipment for example, but just like that's a great example of like just working a dog through fears and teaching them to build confidence by facing those fears.
Cool.
Head
Oh
on,
yeah,
you know.
Cool.
Yeah, they come back from like enrichment camp. Like these dogs are like really feeling themselves. Like they come out and they're like,
See them
hell
trot around the
yeah,
yard.
like they're just like they got like a swagger. Like
It's so great. Yeah.
I was at that special place, guys. Like I'm so tired. Yeah, I was like, they just have me doing all kinds of crazy things, but it really is cool. Yeah.
That's awesome. I've always viewed enrichment as in enrichment. It's a word I would say that I shied away from for a little bit, only because I feel like it's gotten really blown out through like TikTok and stuff like that lately of like just everybody. I feel like a lot of people, I've talked about this on the podcast, a lot of people use enrichment as like the end all be all solution for every issue that they can ever have with their dogs. Right. So because of that, I always stayed so far away from it because I was like, well, that's not the solution, guys. Right.
Yep.
The more I kind of started, involving myself with it and learning about it and stuff like that, I think that enrichment to me is anything that mentally stimulates the dog in a productive way, right? So forget just toys and just food and stuff like that, but examples of, let's say we have a fearful, like this dog that bit my hand yesterday, and it was an accident, guys. He didn't try to do it on purpose, just so everybody knows. He's a good boy. But his name is Rex, and this dog is freaking absolutely terrified of everything, right? And yesterday we spent like the afternoon just teaching him how to get into the grooming tub, right? Because one of his things is the owners can't give him a bath because he freaks the F out every time water touches him, or he tries to get him into it, or he gets restrained or anything like that. So we focused first on just teaching him to walk up the ramp into the grooming tub, and then getting the slip lead attached to the grooming tub around his neck and just getting him chilling in there by himself for a little bit. And for the first literally like 15 minutes, like he wouldn't even put a paw on that the ramp for it, right? So we just worked through working and past it. And dog has no food drive, no toy drive. He's just freaked out of his mind. And by the end, we got him going up and going down, and he's smooth with it. It's not requiring very much leash pressure and stuff like that. And he was just beat tired from it after because we stimulated his brain beyond belief, right? And that's something where it's not enrichment from the standpoint of like this was something that was super fun for him or this or that, but it was extremely mentally engaging. It forced him to channel in all of that energy and stuff that he had into a task, and he is going to benefit from it in the long run, right? So I try to look at all of the different enrichment type things that you could do, from everything from like the snuffle mats and like the chase games and the flirt poles and the this and the that, to those more, more serious versions of what things are the dog really struggling with, and how can I engage their brain in a way that gets them working through some of that kind of stuff. And like I said, agility equipment is one of the first ones that I saw people starting to use for that kind of stuff, because you'd have these dogs that are just so terrified with different textures or things moving under them. And we never had agility equipment. So what I would do is I would walk the dogs around the corner to this park that was around the facility, and I would walk them on like the playground equipment.
Yeah.
And like, the ramp that like wobbles
agility.
and stuff like that when you go and stuff. And you get these dogs walking over this stuff, and it's crazy how much they freak out about it at first. And then once they realize it's not that scary.
Yeah.
It's like they're good.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes then they're like excited about it.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
I did something like, like something was scary and I did it.
Yeah.
We talk about this a lot. Like some of these dogs like don't know how to work through fear. They just want to go.
No. Yeah.
Like it's like, I'm out. And like these little micro stressors of like, look, this was hard. You did it. Now it's cool. And then, oh, like this is something I can do.
And it's also like the fact that like you have to do it. Like
you
there's not an
you
option.
have to be put on a slip lead and go to the vet sometimes. You have to be able to jump up on something. Maybe the vet has to get you on this table. I don't know. You have to do it. And then that's a moment of like, they're like, they want to quit, they want to quit. And once you're like, nope, sorry, not an option, there's like such a breakthrough that they're like, oh, okay.
And it's such a breakthrough, and it gains so much like leadership capital, like on your part of like, I worked you through this, like I didn't give you it was me that didn't give you the option to quit.
Yeah.
And because I got you to do it and you were able to be successful with it, you're now going to look at me differently as somebody that's going to push you past something and push you past something that I know is not going to be scary, right? Yeah. I'm telling you this is not scary, so you're going to start to over time trust me through some of that kind of stuff.
I love that. Yeah,
I like that phrase a lot. Leadership capital.
Leadership capital. I heard that first time in a
nice.
Jocko Willink book, where he used it from the standpoint of like a business owner or manager or something like that.
Yeah,
he used it from the standpoint of like every time you actually need to like enforce something and like stand your ground on something or like that. He's like, you're using up some of your leadership capital.
I like that.
He's like, don't use up too much of it. God, I was going to say something else with that. So yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it is working them past those types of hurdles. God, I feel like I had another good point and I lost it. So, but yeah, no, things like that are really, really interesting to me. This is what I was going to say. Yeah. And this goes back to my issues initially with a lot of the enrichment stuff that I used to see was people were using it as the solution as far as enrichment or counter conditioning, making things not scary to dogs, right? So like, let's say dog is terrified of the vacuum. You have a lot of people that are just like, well, pump it full of treats next to the vacuum cleaner so that the dog has a good association with the vacuum cleaner or feels more confident around the vacuum or this or that, where I try to look at it like, yes, we want the dog to not have a horrible experience with this, but if you're going into the things with the expectation that dogs should just not be scared of anything, that's not real life. Like in the end of the day, there are things that are scary. There are things that are going to make dogs anxious. There's things that's going to make dogs fearful. And the problem is not the fear. The problem is not the anxiety. The problem is the dog's ability to control themselves when they're fearful or when they're anxious, right?
Yeah.
So if you could first teach them to control themselves around that fear, and if they're scared of the vacuum, teach them a really good bed command or down command or this or that, and get them to just keep it under control, right? Focus it in here. Once you've checked that box, then you could spend all the time you want making it then a positive association. Right? But you have to make sure you have the control in that fearful state of mind, because especially some of these really serious anxiety cases or fear cases or whatever it is, so many things are scary that if you never gain that impulse control around it, you run the risk of having like a liability of a dog that's going to either take off on you or act aggressively all the time, or something is going to spook them and they don't have that coping mechanism of keeping it under control. You can create a lot of problems because of that.
Like you say, like that generalizes, like that impulse control can generalize to so many different fears.
It can, but I think yes. So it can generalize to it, but ultimately, like they're just going to have that fear of all of these different things. Right. And as we work on it in different places where we teach better impulse control around it, that then will help you better for the next situation. Right? Yeah. If my dog's in a peak state of fear because there's a vacuum here and I teach them to keep their self under control around it, and I've checked the box that you're in like the most fearful state of mind possible, but you're keeping it under control. I know next time you're really scared, I'm going to be able to keep you under control a little bit easier. And the next time it's going to be a little bit easier, where we know, I mean, counter conditioning, not that it's a bad thing by any means, but it's time it's time.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it takes you a long
Yeah.
time to develop a positive association with things. So if you're contingent on like, I have to create a positive association with this, when things catch you off guard and your dog gets scared and you're not prepared to do that, it's like, well, what do you do then?
Yeah.
How do I handle this situation
Yeah.
then? How do I manage this then? Am I just going to chalk it up as a loss of like, well, there's nothing I could do here right now? Or if my dog's off leash, well, my dog's just going to run away right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Or am I going to make sure that when they're scared and when they're anxious, I can control them first so that I could work on that later?
Yeah. That's
So.
like beautifully said. Kate's looking at me because she knows like
So much of this,
like
yeah.
counter conditioning. I think lately for us, for whatever reason, we've had a lot of clients coming in like, even if they're not saying it, like that's definitely their plan of attack. And we've been talking about a lot to clients, and there's a lot I struggle with it. Time is one of them.
Sure.
Like as a trainer,
huge,
there's
yeah.
yes, like I know there's many ways we could do this with this dog.
Sure. Yeah.
But like we're on a time constraint, we're on a budget constraint, and there's like some ethical things there too. Or like, am I going to make this person come in once a week for 6 months? You know what I mean? Like for
Yeah.
something that I think so. I always tell my clients, I'm like, look, like yes, we want to help the way your dog feels, but like right now, that's their timeline. Like I can definitely control their behavior, and then hopefully and usually the feelings about things are going to follow after that. And we talk about that a lot. And also,
That's a much more simple way of saying everything I just said.
no, you said
I spent like 5 minutes.
no, it was great.
And that was perfect.
No, you simplified it many times. No, but we also talk a lot about how like behavior then doesn't always change just because we've changed a feeling. So some of these, like let's talk about reactivity a lot. Like some of these dogs aren't stopping and thinking every time they're reactive. Like, am I scared? Yes. Rah. You know what I mean? There is this automatic, like dogs just behavior change so fast. It's just this like, I see this and I blow up.
It's rehearsed. Yeah.
So sometimes we're just adding attention to something and excitement. Like I see something and I throw. So, it depends on the dog, how much time we'll spend using that type of thing. But a lot of times it's like, hey, let's take away these pathways that this dog's been going down. Like, no, you can't bark at dogs anymore, and force them to cope and find something else. And then it's hard. It's hard, and it's hard to kind of like, it makes sense, like counter conditioning. Like I said, when I started like Karen Pryor, everything was like, but when you're dealing with like, and
Bat
when you're,
cat.
yes. But when you're dealing with like self-satisfying behaviors, like you're just, basically the dog's winning on all ends. The dog's like, sweet, like bark, I'll get a treat. And I freak out, so.
Yeah.
But,
and then you have this constant just like spike, like exciting, fearful.
Yep.
And I talk about that a lot too, of like a lot of these dogs that have fear aggression issues, for example, right? Typically with those dogs, I could find at least 3 or 4 places in the dog's day to day where they have a very similar extreme of energy, but in the opposite direction. So an extreme spike in arousal and excitement, right? A lot of these fear aggressive dogs that just get into this just freakish fear where they're just lashing out and stuff. They can just get uncontrollably excited in situations where the owner comes home or when they're playing or this or that. And if they're constantly going from like just pinging here, that could easily flip to pinging here, right?
Yeah.
So by making the exciting things a little less exciting and the scary things a little bit less scary, it can kind of level it out a little bit and not be quite as extreme.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
Yeah.
very interesting. So what types of training do you really enjoy doing at this point? Is there certain things that you guys really enjoy the most out of any of the stuff you're doing right now?
Definitely there's probably different things. I don't know what you like.
Sure.
I can guess, but.
Do you mean like practically speaking, like with clients, or can I just tell you like my favorite thing in dog
enjoy doing in dog training the
trick
most?
Training. It's my favorite.
Oh, Kate's
trick
really
training
good.
is my favorite thing in the universe. I don't do it often. I do a lot with my dog. What I like about it too is that there's so many tricks that like I don't think my dog is like solid on. Like he might not do it in every environment, or he might not do it without a lure, but I just love that whole process. I'm like, there's so many, I don't know. I just love the whole thing. And so like we've had a couple times people, I think actually only one dog that I could think of. Their parents their owners sent him in for a day train for trick training. And Amanda was like, okay, like this isn't happen. I was like, this is my dream. Like, it's not what I do. It's like really not what I do on a day-to-day basis or ever. But I love the mechanics of it. I love the timing.
Kate's really good.
What kind of anything in particular as far as trick training?
My favorite trick right now is wipe your paws.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to Megan about this because she walked to the facility and I had a Frisbee upside down on the floor with a treat under it. And the dog was like pawing at it. And I'm like, yes, give the dog. She's like, what's going on in here? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing wipe your paws. Cause like, I love that trick. I'm like, my dog, I'll just say wipe your paws and point to a doormat. And I think it's like so cool. The operant, like you told me to do something and I'm going to act on it, I think is awesome. Some things I struggle with tricks are any type of like body movement. I actually saw a video a long time ago of you with Vinny, and I think you had another dog there too, and you told one of them, I don't know if it was in German or what, but I know one of them ran into heel position, the other one ran and sat between your legs.
I was probably Vera and Vinny.
Yeah, it was cool. So cool. And that kind of thing I love, I struggle with, and I don't know if it's because my dog struggles with it, but anytime the dog has to move their body quickly in a certain direction and land in a certain place, I've never been able to fade lures, and I don't get it. But the rest of it I love.
I think it's because a lot of people rush it. It's
that's probably what it is.
Process.
Okay.
Like teaching like focused healing, for example. Like it's like probably one of the longest commands that you could possibly teach because there's so many aspects to it.
Yeah.
You know? Have you done a lot of work with like the touch pads and stuff?
We do a little bit. Yeah.
A lot of that is you teach spatial awareness with that, and you spend a ton of time teaching
awareness.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then just, fading it into whatever position it is you want.
Do you do like flat touch pads too? Like, did you fade into that and then just on the floor? Like, do you dogs do pivot into heel? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you got a couple ways you could teach it. Like a lot of people do like around the back to the heel position.
That one,
and also let me caveat here, like, I am very disconnected from the sport dog world at this point. Like that was not really ever my like total wheelhouse. Like I enjoyed doing it and I understood a lot of the concepts and stuff, but I never really obsessed myself with it as much as like Jake did, for example, or any of that kind of stuff. Like pet dog training and the behavioral side of things was always what I really loved. But yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff is teaching the dog how to move and understand that their rear end, for example, like is a thing. Right? It's not just back there, but like there are certain things that you have to do with it. Yeah. And then you teach whatever kind of touch pads you want. The big thing I remember learning was that you're right there.
Yeah, keep talking.
Biggest thing I remember learning was that you want to fade off of those types of things as quickly as you can because the dog can get so stuck on them.
Yeah.
Same with like change of positions when you used to do like sit down, stand and stuff was a big thing a lot of people would teach. A lot of people would teach it in a box so the dog couldn't physically move around. But the second you take away that barrier, they're out of it. They don't understand it anymore.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just being really precise about where you're rewarding. So you teach the awareness to be able to move, and then you could use different types of barriers to help with it. So once you fade out that touchpad, you could do it against the wall so the dog has a better idea of it, right? And then ultimately, when you go to fade off of that wall, once the dog is really smooth on the wall, really smooth on the touchpad, you teach the dog to do it, and then you just, with your luring and stuff, you only reward when they're in the correct position, And you could kind of overcompensate where like if Vinny's starting to, go into a focused heel and kind of really crabbing like this, and like kicking
he's
himself.
Sideways and
you would overcompensate.
Like he's tucked in further than
tucked in a
you
little
like
bit.
him to really tuck, but he's like really do.
Yeah, I mean you want him to be pretty straight, right? And if he's just like really like this, I could overcompensate and I can get him to move where maybe he might not be perfect, but he's a little bit more out this way. But by teaching him to adjust himself that's way,
a big part of it.
Next time he's gonna fall instead of like this, he might fall a little bit like this.
Oh, cool.
And then if I start getting it too much like this, then I overcompensate a little bit and go back that way, and you just constantly adjust it until it gets perfect. And then another big thing they talk about in the sport dog world is reward placement of things, depending on what you're trying to teach. Like fronts, for example. A lot of people really like a tight front, where the dog's head is just like jammed against your stomach. And a lot of people think, well, you reward it right here like this. Where actually a lot of the people that are teaching really good fronts right now, when they reward, they're actually throwing it between their legs.
What I was going to say. I've seen people do that. Yeah.
Because it forces them to want to drive further that way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that goes into that. And I'm sure it sounds like you already know a lot of these concepts. You might just be rushing the process a little too much.
Yeah, it's
you just got to spend more time on it.
Yeah. But
and look at like the micro steps of like fading out that lure instead of worrying about going from like full lure to like half lure to like no lure. Like find all of these like little ones in between. You know what I mean? Like have like 10 different variations of fading that lure out until you finally get to it.
And then backtracking when it gets sloppy is like I found myself doing that a lot. I'm like, oh, I went too fast.
Yeah, all the time.
I also have a tendency, Amanda's pointed out, that I tend to help my dog a lot. Like if he's struggling, I go right in with the help. And Amanda's like, just give him a minute. And like, that was
Yeah.
really helpful to have somebody point out like what you're doing. Cause like, I'm like, well, I want him to get there. But if every single time I ask you to do something without the lure, you look at me and then he gets really silly and like starts dancing around. And then like, I'm like, okay, honey, you can't do this. Well, I'll just lure you. And it was like, just, you gotta like give him a minute to figure it out because he's always relying on that help.
Yeah, 100%. And if you force them to wait, like if you have their engagement, right? Like, and that's a whole reason why a lot of people in the sport dog world, they do the engagement sessions and get that like hyper fixation on you. If you have their engagement and you just kind of wait them out, like they're going to start figuring it out eventually, you know?
It's really cool.
Have you guys done a lot with like free shaping and stuff?
I've tried some, when I tried it a while ago, my dog was not as much of a free thinker.
Sure.
So now I'll do like small games, like, okay, I'm gonna sit on the couch with your scoop of food for dinner, and I'm gonna have a little, like, it's so silly. It's an empty coffee container, and I'm like, you gotta touch your nose to it. Anywhere I put it in the room. So like I'll start with, but you know, actually that's not really free shaping, is it?
No, that's free shaping.
Is it?
Well,
I'm waiting.
if you've taught it before, it wouldn't really be free shaping.
That's a good point. So no, I guess I haven't as
so,
much.
So one thing that they used to teach was get a box, right? And have a box in the middle of the room, right? Literally just like a cardboard box or something, and sit there with either your reward marker or clicker or something like that, and see how many different things you can get the dog to do with the box. Right?
Oh, different things.
Different things, right? So you teach them to try to figure out what it is. There's no singular goal. And you just reward for all sorts of different things the dog will do. And you'll see they will do all sorts of ridiculous, weird shit with that box at some point.
Really cool. Have you ever gotten a dog to the point where like they can step all the way in the box without you prompting it?
I don't know if I've ever really worked to that
like,
extent with it.
The goal,
you know? But you
really
could.
cool.
I mean, realistically, I mean, you teach them to touch it first, and then once they get a paw on it, you start getting that, and then two paws. You know, just build up.
Teach them to touch it. You're waiting for them to do that. You keep rewarding, like reward by successive approximation, so you get to that goal. But you're not asking that of them.
You're not asking because you're not training it, right? The idea of free shaping is you're going to try to teach the dog how to do something without ever actually showing them how to do it, right? They are going to essentially figure out how to do that thing. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Gary Wilkes at all, but Gary Wilkes is he's like, he used to do seminars with Karen Pryor all the time and stuff, but like his whole thing is like aversive control. Like he used to teach a lot of that kind of side of things as well. And Gary talks about sometimes that we recently did a podcast on Gary that was really good.
We did.
Gary talks about like down is a really hard command for a lot of people to teach. And we could, you get all these different ways of like teach them to go under things or lure them into it or use a leash to do it or this or that, or physically push them into it. And he's like, literally, it's one of the easiest behaviors to just free shape. He's like, free shaping it is so much easier than anything else, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a behavior that dogs do all the time on their own.
Right.
He's like, so one day when you're just hanging out in your living room, have some treats and wait till your dog just goes and gets comfortable and lays down somewhere. Then mark and reward, right? And then wait till they do it again.
Really
mark and
cool.
reward. And he's like, you do that for 3 or 4 days. He's like, you'll have a down like that.
Yeah.
Where all these people fight with these dogs to get it.
I want to try that.
So much.
That's really cool.
That's interesting.
You know?
I
Yeah.
love that.
So I always thought that was really cool. But okay, so do you like the trick training? It sounds like to me, is it because you enjoy watching the dog just really figure this stuff out? Because that used to be really exciting to me, was like when you were teaching a new command, especially with rewards and stuff, watching them connect those dots, and figure out what you're trying to get them to do was so fun and like fascinating to
So
me.
cool. Yeah. That and like also like the enrichment side of it is like, okay, like I haven't exercised you all day, but now it's dinner time. Let's do something with that. Just because I want you, okay, maybe you're not going to go on a long walk, you're not going to go to a park and run, but I want you to think a little bit. So that too, but it's that moment of like, they're like, ooh, I'm going to try to wipe my paws in this Frisbee to try to scratch it to get the treat under it. Like,
That's a genius
and that
one,
works.
by the way. But I've never even thought about
She's
teaching.
so good. Like,
I
like
thank
that
you. I love this
or-
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is cool.
It's really
a
fun.
cool finished trick too.
That's like what
very
that's what I'm
practical.
saying.
Yeah.
There's like I prefer the type of tricks that are easier to finish. Like spin is like obviously like an easy to finish. I'll do like say your prayers, like I'll kneel down and my dog will jump up my arm. I'm trying to get him to drop his head down. That's only 50-50, but I'm better at the tricks obviously that are like more easy to finish. And I strive to like do the more advanced ones where they're pivoting into heel position. But yeah.
Do you work on a lot of different tricks at once with your dog? Like, do you have like multiple ones you're currently working?
Oh yeah, there's so many that aren't ever going to get finished. And some of them I'm like, okay, well, I just want you to work for your food, so we're just going to like lure you through a bunch of these. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm like, I should finish, but then sometimes I'm thinking about it and I'm like, what's my motivation to finish these tricks? Like, so I can show them off? Like, I don't really care that much.
That's the whole point of it. That literally is it. Yeah.
So we can get to where it's like video quality and like, oh, we're done.
You know what's hilarious is when I first started getting into dog training, I remember there was this video like floating around the internet of this like guy with a Doberman, and I'm sure you guys have seen this video, whatever. He gets this Doberman to do like 15 different commands. Like he comes into the heel and goes to the other heel and between his legs in front of him. He's just in like a room doing it. And I remember just being like, that is the coolest freaking thing in the world.
Looks
And
sweet.
my whole thing when I first started training Vera at the time, I didn't even have Vinny, was like, I'm going to teach her a sequence of like 10 different tricks so I can take a video of it and it just looks badass. And I think I got up to at one point like 4 or 5 different things that I got her to do in sequence and had a video of it. And I remember looking at it like,
That's it.
Now we're done. Yeah.
Made it.
so cool.
Yeah.
All right. What about you?
I think as far as like client stuff, you know, we spend a lot of time with like the basic things, you know, like the heel and stuff. And I like that. If a client wants to like enhance their dog's like toy play, I personally love doing that stuff, like especially tug, or if we get a client in who's like never done that stuff and I get a dog who's like nuts for it. Sometimes I'll like get a little lost in and I'm like, okay, I know you're not really here for this, but I just want to show you like this is important.
Run off with the dog.
Yeah, like I'm like, this is important. So I like toy play stuff, which sometimes I do like really push on our clients. Like if I really think it's important, love training. I definitely, especially lately, have been more in the sport stuff. So I'm always interested in those things. As far as things I do with clients, I love heel. I don't know if it's because sometimes it's like you get like really dramatic results, you know, like especially if I get a client who's like, this dog's been pulling like crazy and we're 2 lessons in and the dog's healing beautifully. So it's like, it's also, I think just like watching owners click with that. It's like a very, like I said, kind of dramatic. So I'm always happy to teach that.
Healing is like the staple of like having a well-trained dog.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like we talk about this with clients where it's like, man, like like before I knew anything about dog training, I would judge people based on how they walked their dog.
Right.
That's it. I didn't care about anything else, you know, but it's like, man, that dog is walking real nice with that person.
Yeah.
And then same deal. You start seeing some of these people like Blake, for example, in New York City, right? When you see these videos of him walking like 15 dogs like through New York City, just like healing like
awesome.
rock stars.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
it's one of
look
my
at that. It's
favorites.
like, God damn, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
You know?
It's very cool.
So I would agree with you. And it is the most dramatic initial transformation you can make. Like it's one of those things where like in 1 to 2 sessions, you can completely change somebody's like life with their dog.
Yeah.
Just doing that.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of more stuff you need to do, obviously. But like that's one thing that like so many people hire trainers for and just don't get results.
Yeah.
You know, like they'll go to like 5 other trainers and it's like, all I care about is that I can walk my dog on a leash. And it's like they take this like roundabout ass way of like trying to figure it out and they never actually get there.
Yeah.
You know?
I think when we were doing like a lot of the YouTube video content,
Oh, that's
a
what
couple
people
years
cared
ago.
about the most.
Oh, dude, it was just always fun to me. You know, I'm like behind the camera, so I'm just capturing like everyone's real time like thing.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like, all right, we're going to walk. Show me how you walk your dog. You know, and this dog's like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And then he comes back. He's all right. He's like, all right, watch this. And he like takes the dog for like 5 minutes, and then the dog's like walking perfect. And these people just their jaws are just like,
Yeah.
you know, jaw dropped. And it's like, the most like life-changing moment for these people because they're like, I've had my dog for 5 years and I've never gotten that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
really cool.
and it's like, you know, these like 3 simple things and boom, and you got a dog that can walk perfectly. It's definitely like the eye-opening thing, I think, you know?
What do you feel like you've learned? How long have you guys been in business for now?
The location there, it'll be 4 years in
4
November.
years.
Yeah.
I know you've obviously been doing it quite a bit longer than that, but you've had the
like Process
formal
Canine is 4 years. Yeah.
Cool. What have you learned the most in those 4 years?
There
it is.
There we are.
Hang on.
I like opened my mouth to talk and heard nothing.
I know. And I heard it over there.
It freaks you out, right? And you're like, what?
It's so peaceful in these headphones.
It is really nice.
It's
Like,
so much
it's
better.
so nice.
I did a
here.
podcast a couple weeks ago and we didn't have headphones and I was just like, this is weird.
Yeah.
It's like, how do I know this is working?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, what have you learned
so much.
the most in the last 4 years?
I think what I'm always still learning is trusting, like as far as like running the business side of things, like that a lot of times my employees will do things better than I do. And like as I found that out, I'm like, oh my God, this is great. Like they like
it's shocking initially,
yes.
right? And like there's
amazing.
a part of you that's like, God, like really? But like once you accept that and you can understand that there are people that could do this job just as good as you can, it's a game changer.
It's amazing. And I'm almost like, even like with clients, like the patience and like, somebody else who wants to work in my business better than I would, especially with things. So learning that and now like moving those types of things around is good. As far as training, like I'm always still working on perfecting, like working with clients and in our systems, especially like we're not nearly as like proficient and refined as you guys, for example, like in terms of like, it feels
we
like
market ourselves that way, but like
beautiful.
that's something like I'm constantly working on as well.
So yeah, just like figuring those things out. I would say learning how to use my staff to do things that I would think I had to do or somebody else couldn't do. Would be my biggest.
That's a really great one.
This guy.
Here we are.
We were talking so nicely about your computer.
We jinxed it.
Yeah. But like, he was just like, I have to like touch every dog and like, I got to make sure you guys are doing it right. You know? And he finally loosened up and like, I've seen like, he sees that everyone like knows what the hell they're doing, and it's taking a lot of pressure off of him. Like
big time.
Yeah. Because I watching this guy like run around like a chicken with his head cut off. Dude, because he was like, I have to do it all like like I'm teaching you guys, but I got to do this, and then it was finally like, all right.
You
can take care of it. Yeah,
and I'm sure you feel this also, and I'm sure you to some extent, but like being like the owner, right? Like you feel such a deep responsibility to the people that are paying you money to make sure that they get their money's worth out of things.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And you could stress yourself out too much about it sometimes, and feel like, again, like, oh my God, like they have these expectations and they're just not going to get met unless I make sure that they get met, as opposed to realize, again, especially in this industry, it is such a fulfilling, rewarding industry that the people that are involved in it, as long as you treat them right and give them support, they're going to want to provide that same thing for them.
Yeah.
Oh
my God. Like, especially when, like, as far as training goes, like, because for a while it was like Kate and I would put the work on the board and trains like during the day, and I was doing all the lessons. That still happens. But as soon as Kate started getting exposed more to the clients, it was like a game changer. Like, oh my God, like, you just kind of, so that was an important learning thing for me of like, oh my gosh, it just changes. But I mean.
Mine for me has always been just letting people help you more also, like finding places to admit when you don't know all the answers to stuff, and like I said, like there are times that I lean on the team.
Oh,
yep. What are you doing, dude?
I just
hit your knee.
Yep.
Oh,
funny bone.
It's not funny.
Not funny. But there's times, like I'll lean on the team to help support me when I'm stressed out. Like they'll carry some of the extra load and stuff like that, and they'll make sure stuff gets done, or they'll step in when they see that there's holes where they need to be stepped in and stuff like that. Yeah. We just have such a great team because of it. And it's funny, like going to the people that can do your job better than you can. It was funny. I remember a couple of times in particular on the phone with people, and they're like, oh, I'm going to be filling in on a lesson or this or that or whatever it may be. And I've had a couple of people tell me, well, I wanted to work with Bridget or I wanted to work with this person. And I'm just like, really?
Yeah. I'm like, okay. That just happened. Actually, someone emailed and was like, can I set up a lesson? Like it was with me or something. And they want to work with Kate. I was like, oh, okay. Like,
when I called them, they're like, is this Amanda? And I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's Kate. And they're like, well, who's Kate?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you about myself.
Yeah. It's flattering, but then like, I'll have a little ego check. I'm like, oh, okay. That's okay. Yeah. That's okay.
100%.
I love that. Like, or when someone calls Process and I pick up the phone and they'll be like asking for another member of my staff. They'll be like, well, I was talking to so-and-so. I'm like, okay. Like,
cool.
There you go.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
That's how you start. This goes to the podcast we had with Alex where we start talking about though, like it's not, it can't be all about you when you're running a business,
Exactly.
When you're running a company, your job should be to make yourself basically irrelevant, and you be there to, you said at the very beginning, which really resonated with me because it's something I've been trying to work on quite a bit, but my job is to support my staff, right? It's my staff's job to support our clients, right? Not my job to do both of those things,
Said.
Very
cool.
cool.
When I was down with Tyler Muto, where I like saw a lot of this, he said like he wanted to get his business to a place where he was just there kind of coaching. And I was like, oh yeah, like that, you know what I mean? Like, or time spent on the business versus in the business and those types of things. So
he's really helped me with that quite a bit, especially lately. There's been a couple of times in the last like year I've reached out to him for a little bit of guidance for stuff. And, you know, cause what did he tell me the other day? He's like, yeah, I'm like basically the closest thing to being retired without actually being retired at this point. But like, that's, you know, nice. Like he's like, that is the goal. He's like having a company, he's like, is something that should be able to operate independently without you.
Yeah.
Right. And in this industry, it's hard because you got to balance the making sure you're giving the support that you need to and making sure you're not rushing it or taking steps to decrease the service that you're offering or anything like that to get to that goal. But that still should kind of be like the North Star at the end of the day. Yeah. So
I have a question about that. So in terms of like employees, like having employees, like how do you kind of instill in them like your ultimate goals for your business and like you want them to be, you know, self-motivated by your same goals, kind of like you want to make sure that they are also going that same direction, but things might be more motivating to you because that's your vision for your business and you kind of want them to take on that vision, I guess.
And again, I don't have all of the answers to this, but I would say that what I've noticed have been the biggest motivators for the staff is giving more control, right? When they feel like they're in more of a position to make decisions and more of a position to make adjustments to things and be able to really do things the way they want to do things, they will have more pride in that work, right? Even stuff as simple as when I first started having trainers working for me, it was very much, no, you have to do it this way, right? This is the program, right? And we still have a general program that should be followed to some extent because there are things that have to go a certain way, but everybody has their own flair at this point. You know, everybody has their own individual things they like teaching their clients or teaching the dogs or certain ways that they go about doing different things, you know? And it took me a little while to be okay with that. But as I've been more okay with that, I think that has really helped to increase everybody's drive to do so. And then you said, you know, culture is really important, right? Like this is something that we constantly are up and down with. Figuring out and trying to find the right recipe of it is inter-staff relations is so important. People need to like coming to work and like the people they're working with and be able to feel like they truly are a team working towards the same goal. So everybody has to be aligned. If you have one person in that, you know, a wheel, right, that is not directly aligned to the goals that everybody else is at, it will derail everything.
Yep.
Interesting.
Right. And that's been the hardest part for me is, like I said, getting all of those things figured out and putting the right people in the right place. I read a book somewhat recently, last 6 months, called Good to Great. Fantastic book. Kind of, it breaks down two different types of companies that in the long term, like over the course of, I think they said 10 to 15 years, succeeded, and ones that were very, very successful and like basically their competitor and like looked like they were going to succeed, but only succeeded for like maybe 5 years or something. Okay. They broke down the differences between all of them and then categorized it into chapters. And one of the chapters was, before anything else, put the right people on the bus, right? So by having the right type of people with the right mindset, the right growth mindset and driven mindset, he's like, before you even worry about what they're doing, as long as you have the right people there, you know that those people are going to help drive that company and build that company to be more successful over time. And that's, I mean, you could just tell talking to you guys how great of a relationship you two have, right?
Thank you.
And
I was going to say.
And I would assume from what I've heard, it's very much like Kate that came in with Watson, right?
Katie, yeah.
And Katie's, I believe, girlfriend works for you still? Or
her wife, Kristen works for us. Yeah.
You know, you could tell how much she respects what you guys do and stuff, right? And it's one of those things where when you have that relationship and you have that culture and you have that responsibility put on people and stuff, and then you tack on another big thing has been, you know, for me, employee retention is everything. So I've really tried in the last 2 years, especially with everything going on in the economy right now, is to continue making this job the most difficult job to leave, if possible.
Yeah,
you know?
I tell my staff, like, I'll just like, people will be like, oh, you've had this person for a while. I'm like, I forbid anyone to leave. So
I mean, that's the goal, because you know how like You are. Don't apologize.
Yeah. We'll start hitting her. Like you'll just reach across.
Don't do that. We won't do that. But like. She knows, like how important of an employee you are, right? I know how important my staff is, and I can't afford to lose any of them, right? So in order to make sure that I don't lose them, I have to make sure that they feel fairly compensated with benefits, with pay structures, with other perks and stuff that are involved with the business and stuff like that. So it's everything, But I think all of those things combined create somebody that wants to grow with the company.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And there are other companies that I'll see that get very stagnant of, okay, cool, this is what we do. And it's not really going to go anywhere else from this.
Yeah.
Right. Like I have a growth mindset. Like I want to grow bigger and better and continue doing cooler things.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that North Star of mine helps people be excited about like, we're still trying to change and better things.
Yeah.
We're never complacent and stagnant with where we're at.
Yeah.
I said, I just had to add, when you're talking about retention, how you want people to stay. Amanda has always joked about what she's going to get me for my wedding gift for years now. And this is before I even had a boyfriend, was dating anyone. And I was like, I should probably like try dating first. But she I really liked the vacuum cleaner process. She's like, all right, well, that's your wedding gift.
Yeah.
You better be, it's
like her first week of work. Like, it was very weird to say.
So I'm still working towards that vacuum cleaner.
Oh, you're getting a vacuum cleaner for your wedding gift.
I like
she's not even engaged.
Yeah, no.
It was a joke about like, I just assumed
But if she
I
gets
would
married, you're going to get her a vacuum.
Yeah, so I've always been working towards that. So just in terms of like long term,
it was this assumption.
You're not ever leaving. So
when that like she'd be here forever.
Yeah.
Make sure it's a Dyson Animal 2 because it's the greatest vacuum on the market.
Oh, I'm like a vacuum snob, and we go to this like vacuum. Okay, so I walked into this vacuum store. This was like before I opened Process, but around, and he told me like I was a Dyson nut.
They
and
said
he was
no
like,
Dyson.
He said no Dyson. So they break all the time, and he started selling me these. What's it
I don't
called?
even know what the brand is. They're just so good.
Auric? Is it like an Auric or something?
It's similar. It's like it's a bag.
It's not the heavy
It's got a bag.
Yeah.
These things are awesome. If they break, it's all
those
like
are
replaceable.
workhorses though too.
They are.
I mean, they're tanks.
And
those
like we're
types of vacuums.
vacuuming, 6,000 square feet every day, like twice a day. Like
Is that really how big it is?
all the indoor. Interior.
So this gives you more
That
perspective.
earlier.
We were talking about square footage of locations and stuff, and I threw out the number of 1,700.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh, that sounds pretty big."
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not very big. Yeah.
Okay, well that helps. Yeah.
Yours is 6,000.
Yeah. Our
That is-
interior, our yard is 16,000.
I'm so jealous of
Yeah.
that.
We got super lucky.
Wow.
We have like 2,700 square feet right now.
Yeah. You guys make the most out of it.
For
sure.
There's 15 of us, and we're all tripping over everybody.
Everything looks always so neat and I'm
know.
not a very neat and tidy person. The rest of my staff is, so it's like really hard for them because I'm like, like if Kate's gone from the training center for 2 days, I'm like, oh God, like I gotta clean up in here. But
That's hilarious.
yeah, your place always looks like we love
Clean.
it. We're like such big
Yeah.
Miracle Canine
I think yours
fans.
are so
Well,
cool.
thanks.
Everything
guys.
always looks so. I want to tell the story about
Yeah.
the lanyards. Do you
Oh,
remember
go
that?
for it. No, I don't remember.
So like we were like upping your training and doing more boarding trainings, and like I was so excited because we got these custom Process Canine lanyards
That is
for our
pretty
e-collars.
tight.
I was super pumped. Literally like 2 days later, it shows up on my Instagram feed. You guys got like the Miracle Canine
the
skins.
skins.
And I was like, oh my God. I was like, are you kidding?
By the
This is
way,
so much cooler.
you guys should get those because your logo would look tight on like the blue, like that, the navy.
I need to
blue.
ask you where you get those.
You get them straight through eCollar Tech.
Really?
If you contact them, they have a design team. You just have to order. I believe it's a minimum of like 200.
Oh, sure.
200
Yeah.
to 500, something like that.
But I was like,
Yeah.
how did they do this? Because I'd never seen them before.
Yeah.
The only time I had ever seen them is Off Leash Canine does them, right? So we would always see the orange remote come with Off Leash Canine. I was like,
Yeah.
if fucking Off Leash Canine can get these,
Yeah.
we can get these. You know? So I reached
Yeah.
out to them and we got them done. It was pretty
Oh,
sweet.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Of course, I
yeah.
didn't think of
Send in the
that.
logo file and boom.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very easy.
They're
very
sweet.
easy.
They come in like looks like donut trays.
Yeah.
Oh, because
just
they're all
like-
laid
yeah,
out. So
they're
they
all-
don't slide
Oh, cool.
together.
Uh-huh.
Ooh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so they're all set up.
Sweet. Lanyards are tight though. We should
Lanyards were cool.
Yeah.
I thought it was a different lanyard story when you were talking about being neat and stuff.
Oh, I always leave them all around the training center.
So the hook that we hang the lanyards on in a facility is, I can't reach it, but
It's not even a hook. It's just an old nail
it's
that
an
was
old
there.
nail that's way, it's probably like 6 feet up, and I'm like
Yeah, do a little
5'3". Yeah, well, every day. So Amanda, I like to have a carabiner clip on my e-collar remotes. I clip them to my my like fanny pack
Yeah.
strap or whatever.
Sure.
And Amanda prefers the lanyards. I don't like them because they dangle and I don't know, distract me. But So every day when she takes dogs out, she uses a lanyard and then she leaves it on the counter. And then every day I'm like, oh, I got to tidy up. So I have to grab the lanyard and jump up there.
I didn't know she was doing this for like a year.
2 years. I recently told her and I was like, by the way, I actually can't reach where those belong. I just have to like really like make a little loop with my hand and jump to try to aim. And she's like, wow, I didn't know you were doing this whole time. That's a lanyard story.
I still put them there.
Working on that vertical jump story.
Yeah.
Like it.
So you were one of the first, right? When Process.
Yeah, Liza and
the
I.
first,
Yeah.
like her and my
The
other
first,
manager.
There's two of us.
So seeing it from the beginning to where you're at now, you know, how has that been? Seeing kind of like from the outside in of her building this empire.
It's
you know?
crazy. It's crazy. I mean, I didn't know anything about business, so like, it just the fact that she can do. And I was talking to my boyfriend about this too, and he is part of a business and doesn't own it, but he works for it. And he was just saying, he's like, yeah, she does everything, like every little part of business. I was like, wait, what? Like, I don't even think about it, but it's really cool that she's like kind of built this thing where she can do this, and this, and then also be here for daycare and dog training. And and I never I didn't see the training. I didn't expect the training to blow up like it did. And that's been really, really awesome.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, like I never expected that I could actually be a dog trainer. Like that was just a concept of mine. So that I didn't expect. It was really cool.
Going from like the first thing is help me pick some trash up in the yard.
Literally,
over here, 'cause we don't,
yeah.
you know,
I was like,
it's like,
Or like
I
Kate
was so
struggling to like
excited.
leash walk a dog up the stairs, like one of her first days. She's like, I think I'm gonna hurt him.
A small dog has
come so far.
Am I gonna
Yeah.
pop his head
Yeah,
off?
yeah.
Am I gonna pop his head off,
Yeah.
Amanda? She's
That was like a big
no,
concern.
pull the leash and
Yeah.
is it safe?
Pull the leash.
yeah. But you know, we were talking about like culture and like and how to keep that retention and keep people there and motivated and everything. It's like it's really cool to see. It's almost
4
like,
years is a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've been there
Cool.
for almost 4 years, I mean, like, that's really good.
Yeah, it's like it's cool to see the similar thing. Everyone has their growing pains, but at the end of the day, here you are, and now you have the staff that you wanted. You know, you've created that culture. you know?
And I think a big part of it is Amanda like truly genuinely cares about people and how they're doing. So like, you know, if somebody's going through a breakup, they're going to be like, Amanda, I need a minute. And she'll be on her way out of the door for the day. And she'll be like, okay, let's sit down and talk about it. Like I've had family issues. Like
Everybody cries. You know this.
we
like,
all cry all the
This
time.
is mostly female. We've
all
two
cried
men, which is like the
many
most
times.
we've had at one time.
It is.
And
we have two.
we've all
What do we
cried.
have? Two. We have two, and then me. You know?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is like same deal. Like it's almost always female.
Yeah.
I've been cried in front of a lot of
Yeah.
times, and it's funny because
bet.
I've asked before because I'm very like again non-emotional about things sometimes, and when people cry in front of me, I usually just act non-emotional, right? And I'll just like logically talk to them.
Helpful.
I remember
It's helpful.
asking one time, I was like, "Is that like good, or should I be more like comforting?" Or like,
You start crying too. Like,
like, do you want me to cry? I could
That's what I
try.
do.
Like,
yeah, Kate will
like-
cry if anyone cries.
It's horrible. I can't stop. Even
they
if
were
I'm
like,
not sad
"No,
about
this is
it.
actually probably exactly what I need."
Yeah,
right
it's
now."
helpful.
Yeah.
But I think that's huge in like retention because like we can trust Amanda and
Yeah.
it's not just like you're faking it. Like you've never faked anything like ever. Like
Yeah.
you're so
Can't fake
genuinely
it.
To
committed
both a
about like,
good way and a bad way, I
every
guess.
little thing. Yeah. It's been great.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Josh, you got anything else you want to throw in?
No, that was great.
Do you guys have anything you want to add, say? Anything?
I have one quick question.
You could ask as many questions as you want.
Okay, so you had a podcast episode with two of your clients, Margot and
Yeah,
Kayla.
Emma and
yes.
Margo.
Okay, so there was something one of your clients was talking about if your dog can't do this, this, and this, and somebody said something about Josh's dog, and I was like, I wonder what Josh's dog is like. What's your dog like? Who's your dog?
He's an Australian
He
cattle
like
dog.
Josh?
Ooh,
Bender. Yeah.
Cool.
I was actually going to say earlier when we were talking about like fear and like in the enrichment stuff, like getting him to do stuff, that dog has zero fear. And that's like the
Really?
problem because he's just like, I'll do whatever, you know?
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, he's always had a high drive, you know, obviously he's a
Cattle
working,
dog.
Yeah.
a working breed. But I mean, from the beginning, like my girlfriend was just like on top of him. And now,
Awesome.
yeah, we're in the trick training phase now, you know?
Yes.
So he knows to like
Bang.
Played it.
Pretty.
I love that one.
pretty,
We
and
love
then
that
stick
one.
him up. And but
Yeah.
when he sticks him up, he goes like this.
Oh, from a sit pretty?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
pretty, and then
cool.
stick him up.
Oh,
and then
that's
do that.
really cool.
But yeah, he'll do the die too, and you bang.
Yeah.
Nice.
But no, he's a wonderful dog.
Cool.
Yeah, I have to post a picture or something.
It's good having a visual because I was like, wait, he has a dog. What's his dog like?
Yeah.
She's
What's he
awake
look
at
like?
night.
What's his name? Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his
What
name?
is Josh's dog like?
Yeah, his name is Bender, and
an awesome name.
he's a red healer. So
Red? Ooh,
red
okay.
cattle dog. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, Josh's like was kind of the first choice to be like the second person on this podcast because like him and I have been like doing dog related things together for what now almost like 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's been quite a while. So like he has a really great insight into things because like he's been around it without actually doing
That's
it.
cool.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
So I'm not a trainer, but I know enough that like he can bounce things off of
Yeah.
me,
Yeah.
because I literally sat there and I filmed it and then I edited it for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And so it's like I know
That's so valuable.
everything that's going on. Yeah,
It's very
It's
neat.
really cool.
Did Bender go through training at Miracle or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
They kind of just trained him themselves.
Yeah, we
That's
trained
awesome.
them ourselves, but
Cool.
yeah, completely like e-collar, everything. So and I mean it's
Sweet.
just so nice, hearing it from trainers, it's like, oh yeah, of course that's nice, but it's like someone that I did it myself, like through the stuff that I
Cool.
learned,
Yeah.
it's like I have so much freedom with my dog,
Yeah.
just going on a hike and knowing that here you go have fun, like,
Yeah.
and if I need to call you back, I know you're right away. It's just so much
huge.
freedom, and we talk about this all the time. It's like the big thing with like the positive only or whatever. Like, I get it. You can do that, but I have so much more peace of mind.
Yeah. Yep.
At the end of the day, with that, I feel like is so much better for my dog in
Yeah.
the long run.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, yeah, it's been a fun ride for sure. Like, I've learned quite a bit over these long years, But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say, but now here we are doing a podcast. Like I said, we've done one every week this year.
Haven't skipped a week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
We've skipped a week here and there, but we've always made it up.
Cool.
So we've done one technically for every week.
Yeah,
of
you had to
the
go
year
get
so far.
married one week.
Congratulations on that,
Thank
by
you.
the way.
Appreciate it.
Go to Disney World,
Oh, nice.
All that fun
But
stuff.
yeah, we always make it up. We'll like do 2 the next week or whatever. So we're trying to. We will. We're not trying. We will. We will do 52 this year. So,
Cool. 100%. I mean, come on, we're already almost there.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we're doing 40 next week. So we can't stop now.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I can't believe
Any
how
other-
fast this year went.
Any other questions on that notebook?
Nah, we covered better stuff than was on here.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, do you guys want to wrap it up? Tell anybody any last notes you'd like the world to hear? Where people can find you? Any of that good stuff?
You go for that.
Yeah, we're in Shaker Heights. Our website, if you go to processcanine.com, we are not, there's a wait list for daycare and boarding, but training, we're intaking dogs. There's an intake form on there. You can fill that out and get in touch with myself or Kate that way.
Nice.
I would like to say this was such an honor. Seriously, we're like big fans. You guys do awesome work. Like,
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Big
So
fans,
this is exciting.
We
and
appreciate it.
it's-
No, I'm really glad we were able to finally connect.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can do it again soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great because we really want to get more
Yeah.
consistent guests on.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah.
whenever, honestly, we're literally like, whenever, just come on out. Like we can talk about like articles, stuff like that, because we always try to research all kinds of things. So
And there's a lot that like we touched on, but like would be so cool to go deeper into, like when we started
Yeah.
talking about the
Exactly.
trick training and stuff. So that would be
Well, this was
fun.
a cool podcast just to discuss what you guys are doing and ideas and stuff like that. But like, I just like talking about dogs. So,
Yeah.
They're the best.
we can just do
Ditto.
one where we just talk about training dogs.
yeah, what was the one time we were talking? I don't know. We were talking about like a party or something, and he's like, yeah, if it doesn't like. If it's not about dogs, I don't know how to talk to people.
Yeah.
Mentally checked out.
Yeah.
I'm here smiling, but
Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Josh, want to wrap it up?
Do you guys have an Instagram too?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Process Canine.
Just Process
Yeah.
Canine? Okay. Yeah. And then you can find me at Josh DeBay Productions on Instagram, joshdebayproductions.com.
Miracle Canine Training on Instagram, miraclecaninetraining.com, or David the Dog Trainer on Instagram. Until next time.